All right. Good evening, everybody. Kindly asking if we would have somebody just or we can have some acknowledgement on whether you can hear me just fine and you can also see my screen. Just a thumbs up will do, please. Thank you. And then we can start, I suppose. Can you hear me just fine? Can you also see my screen? Thumbs up if you can, please. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. So in the interest of time, we're going to continue our discussion of 5019. Now, I want to put it out there that if you look at the discussion of ethics that we're currently looking at, it's probably what one would call what do you call this? The boring part of research, right? Usually it's kind of things that you wouldn't really find yourself actively making use of unless if you pursue a career in academia. At least the last bit that we're looking at, right? The basics of ethics, obviously, you need to know this, right? There have been instances where people are being quizzed in the, what do you call this? Literally in the final exam, yeah, after spending, is it 2 years or something? What is that here? After spending, I hope this thing is still recording. After spending some, is it 2 years, working on your research, you're asked a simple question to do with ethics and you fail to do that. So it's important that you appreciate the overall process and perhaps why this is important, is it? And the key, if you remember our discussion that we started last time, the key to all of this is centered around this notion that ethics is about doing the right thing, okay? When nobody's looking, I suppose. Sometimes if you are unlucky, you will be found wanting, if you will. Rarely happens, but it is possible. So it's important that we follow the procedure. And also, if I were you, one of the things I would be doing right now is, because ultimately, the idea is to, get you to a stage where when you transition to part 2, this is directed to those that are formally enrolled into this course, you'll be able to quickly put together your research proposal, if you will. So if I were you, one of the things I would be doing is taking stock of the things that you will need to do in part 2. Okay? And by taking note of those things is at bare minimum, you want to remind yourself somewhere to say you will, as a major deliverable, if you want to look at it from that perspective, you look at your project, your research project. One of the things that you're going to do at a very high level is you prepare a proposal and then you apply for ethical clearance approval. So for our year, I'll be taking notes, taking stock of which entities I'm going to go to for me to apply for ethical clearance approval. That's one. Whether you like it or not, all of you are going to have to apply for ethical clearance approval from NASREC, is it? The Natural and Applied Sciences, and Applied Sciences Research Ethics Committee. I just saw a message here. Somebody is hinting at the fact that yeah, but I sent an email though. I mean, I can probably send another message, I guess. I don't know. I can probably send another message, I suppose. That is not a problem. Then we can proceed or something like that. Thanks for the reminder, Mr. John. Do that. Usually when you don't want to you want to inconvenience people here, so you want to make sure you tag these things appropriately, I suppose. If that makes sense, just do this, it's redundant, but that helps like that. I don't know, maybe not. And, yeah, this is the thing here. I guess I'll just send it to Master's Hub or something. I thought people, general, I thought people would have already bookmarked this thing, is it? I don't know. PhD Hub, something like that. I don't know. If you have, yeah. Okay. Right. So it's about doing the right thing, right? So if I were you, one of the things I would be doing is obviously just close some of these things here. I would be documenting, I'll be documenting the things that I'm going to have to do as I'm preparing for ethical clearance approval, and usually the auxiliary permission that you need to obtain is dependent on the type of research that you're conducting. Literally, and I think it's important that we kind of showcase these things that are happening in real time, I think, right? Because they help kind of exemplify things, I suppose. Literally today, I think it was, I'm co-supervisor to a student. I'm co-supervisor to a student who, Petros, I think it is, who is doing research in, it's aligned with education, right? There's a little bit of AI in this, embedded in this, but really his domain is the education sector. Now, what is happening here is, if you look at the education sectors, I want to draw attention to maybe the last, I guess this would be important here, I guess. So he's gotten ethical clearance approval. So he's going through a systematic process. I'm just co-supervisor here. I just clean up. The person who shapes over direction of what he's doing is Professor Chipindi. And then myself and Dr. Mwewa just co-supervisors ideally. So he got, ethical clearance approval from the Humanities and Social Sciences Research Ethics Committee. If you remember last time, I mentioned that the UNZA, and this is in your guidelines actually, the UNZA provides, the UNZA makes available, or has the UNZA, first of all, has regulations, right? So in the regulations, they will outline where exactly you can obtain ethical clearance approval. That's one thing. And it turns out that currently at the UNZA, there are 3 separate entities from where you can obtain ethical clearance approval. And the way these entities were set up is, they were set up in such a way that they're supposed to cater for the different domains, right, associated with the different programs offered at UNZA, or the different research, topics and problems that faculty staff at UNZA will tend to work on. So if you're conducting social science research, for instance, or research situated in the humanities, you're expected to obtain ethical clearance approval from the Humanities and Social Sciences Research Ethics Committee, so the HSS REC. Okay, and this is where Petros got his ethical clearance approval. If you look at his approval, you will notice that this is actually coming from, of course, this is under DRD really, but it's coming from the HSS REC, and currently Dr. Zero is the one who is the chairperson, ideally, of this Research Ethics Committee. Okay, typically these committees will sit on a monthly basis or something like that, but you can apply for expedited ethical clearance approval if you delay. I suppose you pay extra money if you want to do that. So he does this, right? That's the first point here. In your case, almost all of you will get ethical clearance approval from NASREC. Okay, so you apply the specific application forms linked to the Natural and Applied Sciences Research Ethics Committee, NASREC. This will be a starting point. If you are in the health, if you're conducting health-related studies, especially like in the life sciences, you'd obtain your ethical clearance approval from the UNZA break. Now, there's usually misconception that if you're in NS, natural and applied sciences, then you must apply ethical clearance approval from NASREC. Not exactly, right? And I'm specifically wanting to stress this point because we have quite a number of doctoral students and master students that are enrolled into our health informatics program. So we have students that are enrolled into the Master of Science in Health Informatics and also the Doctor of Philosophy in Health Informatics, so PhD in Health Informatics. The idea here is most of you are probably going to have to get ethical clearance approval from UNZA break. Okay, so the University of Zambia Biomedical Research Ethics Committee, ideally. Yeah. But the point I want to stress here about planning is that if you're working in certain types of domains, like for instance, education, right? Like Petros, for instance. In addition to you getting approval from HSS-REC, what he needed to do is get approval from the Ministry of Education. Why? Because he's wanting to collect data from public schools. In fact, from schools in Zambia, even if it's a private school, you're supposed to get permission from the Ministry of Education. Okay? So he wrote to us to tell us that he has permission from the Ministry of Education, which is good for him. He's there, right, with details, and ideally he would use this. So he would use this to then approach the specific schools that he's purposely sampled or something, and get permission from the schools themselves, and then he starts collecting the data or something. So quite the process here. If you're in health, the situation may be slightly different. We've done this a lot with my students and colleagues, where we first of all get approval from Zabrek, and then we get approval from the National Health Research Authority, and then we get approval from the Ministry of Health. Okay, so, and then we get approval from the health facility. In our case, most of our studies have been at invest teaching hospitals, so entities like UTH. So we'll get approval from UTH, and then we approach the HOD. In our case, we've mostly done our work in the department, in adult hospital, actually. Adult hospital, right? Department of Radiology. Some areas are so sensitive that people will not even entertain you if you don't show proof that you have like approval from a recognized REC. In health-centric research, they will not. The Ministry of Health will not even entertain you unless if you use underhand methods. I guess they will need to see approval from NHRA and from a recognized REC. In the case of you guys, because you are affiliated or associated with the UNZA, you need approval from UNZA-PREC. Okay, and the issue of the issue I raised, unless if you're using underhand methods, like people or something, you shouldn't do that, right? Even if you're able to do that. Like in my case, I have working relationships with people. I'll give you an example of work we started initiating with the Cancer Disease Hospital, right? I mean, the people we were interacting with, I know personally, like a person who was acting as the person who is acting, I think she's still acting or something. Dr. Lambert was a colleague. We're in the same cohort at UNZA once upon a time. We worked together as part of the first phase of the project we're doing with Department of Radiology, right? But ethics is about doing the right thing. And as much as we could literally, informally agree to say, can you give us access to this data, and then we'll get ethical cancer approval. But we try to avoid those things, or we're avoiding doing that because it's unethical to do that. And this is what we were discussing last time, if you remember, is it? We went through a process where we were enumerating or itemizing things that are considered unethical conduct in research. Okay? Some things you may take for granted here, like misuse of funds, is it? Yeah. You get funding from somewhere, which is quite common in academia, and in fact, even in industry, right? Those of you that work for government ministries will agree with me, actually. Recently, I was made aware of the fact that Smart Zambia Institute has issued like a call for expression of interest and all those things. But anyway, you do this, right? There's misuse of funds, where you start writing or start forging signatures, right? Producing fictitious receipts so that you gain access to money, research funds. That's unethical. You know, there've been very weird stories that we've heard of at the UNZA where people have bought vehicles, apparently, reportedly, you know, but that is wrong, you know. So some things that we consider unethical conduct are things that will probably require very little policing. Right? It's difficult for people to actually figure out that you're doing the wrong things, but you mustn't do the wrong things. So we went through a series of these classical unethical conducts, and they can be looked at from so many different perspectives, right? What we call general forms of unethical conduct, right? And then we have unethical conduct associated with the 7 steps of research, if you remember. And perhaps what's important is that we can actually kind of create some interesting metrics. I think we did create an interesting metric somewhere here, right? Yeah, where we identify ethical issues and where exactly they manifest themselves. You know, so you want to be aware about these things and you plan for them. There's always this temptation when you're a student, right? You're running behind schedule. You want to collect data. You foolishly, I use the word foolish here, I guess in a good way. You foolishly forget to prepare a consent form, right? And you're supposed to initiate data collection. What do? You proceed and you start collecting data without having participants actually consent. That is considered unethical behavior. Anyways, so we had a discussion on this, and I think one of the things we kind of I talked about was, or rather, I gave you, I think I called this homework. I don't know if it's homework. I don't know how many people had a chance to watch the videos. There's plenty of resources about these classical examples of unethical behavior, right, or unethical conduct as it relates to research. So there's the infamous Tuskegee syphilis experiment. Really horrific and ugly things were done to people just because of their race, is it? Once upon a time where people that look like me and most of you, I guess, were considered subhumans, apparently, right? This is recently as in the 1930s here. But so there was this, right? And then there's also the infamous Stanford experiment. These are I think, fun kind of examples to look at, easy to follow examples. And it turns out that it's a lot easier for us to identify unethical behavior associated with these 2 examples. So if you look at the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, for instance, you begin to notice here that participants were not given an out, is it? They were not given an opportunity to opt out of the experiment. They were not told what the experiment was all about, right? They were lied to. Okay, ideally, when you're collecting data from one of these way used to be called subjects here, but called participants, right? Let's say human participants. One of the first things that you do is you provide them with what's called an information sheet. Okay, that information sheet essentially will outline, among other things, specifics of what sort of risks are associated with the study itself. And this is so important that if you go to the University of Zambia DRD website, graduate.unza.zm, and you look at some of these documents, right, that you have access to here, you notice that one of the things that they provide you is a template called a statement information sheet. Okay, so what you do when you're applying for, and I know this is for HSS Rec, but neither here nor there. One of the things you do when you're applying for ethical cancer approval is you complete this template here, right? This thing is ideally, if you look at these sections or subsections, whatever, these will include all the relevant information that is going to give your potential participants an idea, a comprehensive understanding of what the study is all about, right? Purpose, description, issues to do with confidentiality, and more importantly, the risks and benefits associated with the study itself. So if you look at the Tuskegee experiment, none of that was done, right? They were just taking advantage of the fact that these were, for the most part, people that were ignorant, right? They were not really knowledgeable about what was going on, yeah? So they were told, apparently, reportedly, this is actually, it's right there, it's documented. they were told that they were being treated for what was called bad blood, right? It's a disease. It's called bad blood here. And they were promised to say, if you participate in this study, we will give you free medical treatment. That was not the case, right? If you pay particular attention to the video itself, these people were literally injected with syphilis and they were not given any medication, right? Because the scientists were interested in one thing only. The whole study was centered around trying to understand the progression of syphilis itself as a disease. Now, if you're wanting to understand the progression of the disease, you don't want to give people medication, is it? Because you want to see what will happen, right? To them or something. Very ugly things here. Sadly, here, you notice here that about 2/3 of participants had, syphilis. There was zero consent, right? If you look at the study itself, classic deception took place here. People were being lied to, and treatment was withheld. So all of these are classic examples of unethical conduct, which ideally shouldn't be tolerated. I always use examples of some of the things that we look at here, right? I think I I gave an example of, sometimes I'm not say this, don't quote me on this one though. This is just my personal thoughts about what I see, right? In the global south, you have a situation where people from certain parts of the world, typically from the West, will come in and with all sorts of promises, right? And unfortunately, with social media, they'll paint this really nice picture, yeah, about what it is they're doing. And not that I'm saying this is bad here, but there's something that has been peddled here, right? Injectable PrEP. Oh no, Zambia and Zimbabwe are the first, I guess, the first African countries or something to do this. I don't know, right? Don't know. Are we being used as an experiment? Is Zambia being looked at as a petri dish or something like that? So, but I would like to think that these people, before you start doing this sort of studies, you go through the normal process where you get ethical clearance approval, and the people that are actually participating in this, the people that are going there to get injected with, is it lenacapavir or something or whatever, are probably signing some consent form, right? I agree to be a part of this or something like that. I don't know, right? We don't know the efficacy of this, is it? Yet. I'm sure they've kind of like conducted like pilots and all that, but we don't know the full scale implications of this. However, it's likely that after they do like mass trials in places like Zambia and Zimbabwe, they will know, right? But that's neither here nor there, I guess. I'm sure they're doing controlled studies, right? Can you compare this with some other drug, right? Which is some other drug which is perhaps slightly different, whatever, I don't know. Okay, so there was this, right? And then if you look at the Stanford prison experiment, I've probably watched a movie which is centered around this, right? If you watch the videos on YouTube, you notice that this was a 2-week-long study, right? And the goal was, this was a sociology kind of study, right? The goal was to understand, they were simulating a prison environment to understand human behavior in a typical prison environment. So they recruited, student participants. If you look up online, you notice there are even ads actually that were placed in the newspapers. As an incentive, they were offering them about $15 per day, is it? This is the equivalent of about, in today's money, it's about $113, I suppose, something like that, if you do a projection. Okay. Now it turns out, right, that the person who was at the forefront of conducting this study, Zimbardo himself, has actually outlined that this was unethical, right? There was actually some sort of psychological suffering insofar as the participants were concerned here, not physical harm really, but mostly psychological harm here, so a lot of participants, especially those that were simulating to being prisoners and not prison guards, were subjected to very, very stressful, extreme stressful kind of situations, if you will, right, and emotional turmoil. So there's that. I don't know if there are thoughts on these two studies, but they give you an idea, I guess, of the importance, if we were to sum it up, the importance of ethical consideration when it comes to research. Very, very important, right? Our goal when we're conducting research, I'm going to double back here, remind us. Our goal is to make sure that we, I think we mentioned this somewhere here. Our goal is to, our goal is to guarantee the safety and well-being of participants, whatever it is we're doing, right? And also to make sure that we protect participants' rights. And it doesn't matter really whether you are working with lab rats, pigs, right? Those guinea pigs or actual pigs or monkeys, okay? Those are all considered participants. This is the reason why you notice in the Western world especially, there are usually these animal rights activists, is it, that are so against subjecting these wild animals to these weird trials that people conduct. But I guess the argument there would be for the greater good of humanity. Yeah. So before we figure out whether Neuralink, right? Whether, I don't know if you've looked up on what the history behind Elon Musk's Neuralink. They actually started off, before they started these human trials, they started off with pigs, is it? You know, so those people that advocate for animal rights activists here, against those sort of things here, right? So started off with pigs, I guess because they're lesser beings compared to humans. I don't know. Okay, so those are the things. I don't know if you have any thoughts about the Tuskegee experiment and the Stanford experiment. Thoughts about this? Okay, I thought there would be a little bit of back and forth. I don't know if people actually, read this, right? You want to read these things so that you get an appreciation of this. And also, more importantly, I would want to encourage you to pay particular attention to some of these things here, right? You know, like, there's, I see an ad on Facebook, I guess because of my interest. This person is in an Unza gown, he runs a company, and he's right there in the thick of things. We write proposals. If you're a master's student or a PhD, we can write your dissertation, your thesis. I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, this person actually go to school, right? Or maybe he did, and he just doesn't care, right? That is unethical behavior, right? Both on the person who actually goes there, to have somebody else do the research, do the work on their behalf, because you're masquerading, right? You're passing somebody else's work as your own. And also the person who is engaging in that sort of behavior also. Anyhow, that's neither here nor there. Right? So, but a bit more details here in regards to these issues that we identified as ethical issues, right? And considerations that we want to take into account. I know we are probably already aware of most of these things, but to wrap it in, we just go through these things one at a time so that we have an appreciation of what this is all about. Plagiarism is first up is plagiarism, obviously, and plagiarism is peddled or is defined as stealing of words or ideas, yes, from other people and passing them as your own. It raises interesting questions, right? Or there are some things that you want to be really, really careful about here. It turns out that if you're not very careful, especially when you're at the stage where you are trying to make a proposal or something, people may steal your idea. It has happened, right? I worked with somebody, my master's and doctoral supervisor, who always advocated for a sort of approach where if you're a PhD student, one of the very first things you do is you publish what's called an idea paper, right? So you put your idea out there so that once people discover that you're working on this interesting thing, before they quickly steal your idea and maybe come up with a proposal quickly and publish it or publish something on it, at least you make it known. You mark your territory to say, this idea was mine. You understand? And I'm saying this because people can plagiarize ideas. It turns out it's really, really hard, right? To come up with an idea insofar as research is concerned. Identifying problems can be difficult. It doesn't really come naturally to some people, I suppose. I don't know. But also, I think it comes with time. When you do this thing over and over again, it becomes a lot easier for you to carve out, research problems from something that you may have observed or something that you've experienced or something like that. Okay, so plagiarism is twofold in other ways, right? You can steal existing words or you can steal ideas. For existing words here, we mean you going to some document, you copy and you paste. For most of our undergraduate students, it's behavior like going on Wikipedia. You are preparing an assignment or a proposal, you go on Wikipedia and you copy and paste, including the formatting. And you're going through that work and you're thinking, what's going on here? You can literally see that it's plagiarism. Okay? So it turns out really that plagiarism really can take several forms here, right? For instance, if you find yourself, if somebody presents research designs, frameworks, models, techniques, or indeed results as their own, when in actual fact they were lifted from elsewhere, that's classic plagiarism. When you repeat words, right, expressed by others in written form, you're plagiarizing. So, and this is there's usually a common mistake at this stage, especially if you're a master's student, right, where you are conducting your literature synthesis or literature review, and instead of rewriting what you're reading, you're essentially just copying and pasting text. That is considered plagiarism. Okay, so the idea is the easiest way of getting around that is you rewrite what you've read in your own words, and then of course you cite. If it's absolutely necessary for you to include text in whatever it is you're writing in verbatim form, what you do is you quote it ideally. That's the right thing to do. And more on that when we look at literature review and how we write and all those things. Right? But what we're saying here is repeating, words of others and passing them as your own is considered classic plagiarism here. What else? Duplicating paragraphs or sentences from other texts, right? Which is the same as the previous one, I suppose, right? So the idea here is plagiarizing, existing sources can be avoided when it comes to literature review by citing the work and then quoting the text if you need to. Just to mention here also that once research has been published, it becomes part of the body of knowledge, and you have every right to actually reuse it, right? All you need to do is you need to cite it and refer to it, ideally. The key is you want to acknowledge where the source is coming from, that information is coming from. Okay. Yeah, maybe just to highlight something as it relates to the UNZA. The UNZA has, in the guidelines, I glossed over this. I don't know if people remember, but in the guidelines, there's some interesting statements, right? Statements that hint at the fact that if you engage in plagiarism, and I think we should open this up somehow. If you are found wanting and you engage in plagiarism, there are consequences to that. There are a number of consequences. Excuse me. I want to double down to. So you'll notice here, for instance, under clause number 9 here, termination of student registration, right? So your registration can be terminated. In other words, you're excluded if you are involved in unethical, professional research or academic activities. And such as plagiarism, right? Plagiarism is just cited as an example. So in other words, what the UNZA is telling you is that if you are found engaging in any form of unethical conduct, those things that we've discussed here, your registration can be terminated. Typically, the thing that is easiest to police here is plagiarism. So the UNZA has come up with a threshold in the current guidelines. So it's similarity index of 25%. So if what you've written, let's say in your thesis, is similar to existing text above 25%, you can be deregistered, right? Let's see if I can find some other. There's something else here. I guess that includes a proposal level and all that. But you notice here that during examination, when you're being examined, this is for PhD, but I think it also applies to master students, I believe. You notice here that they're saying if you, where's outright fail here? If the similarity index right, exceeds 20%, it's an outright fail. So usually we don't really expect students to get to this stage, because one of the things your supervisor is going to do is he's going to force you to run your document through Turnitin. Okay, so you run it through Turnitin, and you make sure that you can explain the resulting similarity index, if you will. I wish I had the results of my Turnitin similarity index. When just before I submitted my dissertation, I actually ran this manuscript, my doctoral manuscript into Turnitin, just to make sure that I was able to explain the similarity. Because the way this works, if you look at it, the way this tool works is the text in your manuscript is compared against scholarly research output or literature that you find on the public internet, on the web ideally. Okay, so what that means is that if you're a doctoral student, seeing as you're expected to publish at least 2 peer-reviewed, is it 2 or 3? I think it's 3 or something. At least, is it 2 or 3? I don't know, I've forgotten here. This is thing here. Masters, MPhil, I'm looking for doctoral student here. This is by research or something, I don't know. At least 2 anyway, for our PhD by research department. The things that you are writing about are linked to your doctoral thesis, right? So if they're linked, what Turnitin is going to do is it's going to think that the things that you have in your thesis have been plagiarized, or rather it's going to tell you that they are related to what you've already published. The only thing you need to do here is explain the fact that the similarity index is higher because the similarity is linked to things that you've published with your supervisors or something like that, if that makes sense. So what this image is showcases really is it's showcasing the way Turnitin kind of like works. It will show you where exactly the plagiarized, potentially plagiarized content is coming from. So the sources, which specific articles, from where in the article, right? So it does a really good job, a decent job of kind of like highlighting things that have been plagiarized. And then there's a heuristic that enables the piece of software to actually compute the so-called similarity index. Okay. Although in 2026, I guess, in the age of the machines, things have kind of like changed here, right? You'd have to be really, really dumb, I guess, sorry to use that word, for you to get to a stage where you have a really high similarity index, right? If you're really obsessed about engaging in unethical behavior, right, which you shouldn't. If you look at these generative AI tools, it shouldn't really get to that stage. I don't know. Although some of these tools are getting smarter and smarter. So the ones that subscribe, like many universities, subscribe to Turnitin, right? This is why I'm using this as an example. And Turnitin has newer features which work in such a way that they're able to detect content that has been generated using generative AI tools, ideally. Anyways, so there's that, right? Plagiarism. And what follows next is what we're looking at in the postgraduate guidelines, if you will. The long and short of it here is that, at the very least, what you want to do here is you want to avoid engaging in any form of plagiarism. Don't do it, right? Here's a question from Monga. Yes, please. You can go ahead.
Yes, Doc, I just want to find out about 2 things.
Yes.
You have talked about generative AI things being flagged. So, especially that it's around, and in most cases, obviously, it's used. So, is it something that can be cited as somebody got work from there, or maybe somebody might want to work around that? And then my other second question is, would you cite your own work, for example, if you have you have published certain things? So, do you cite, or do you whatever? I don't know how I put it, but if you have published something and then you're writing something, and then and then there are similar things that are in there. So, do you just bring them in there like that?
Yeah, so thanks a lot. So Monga has highlighted like 2 things here, right? Issues to do with I guess, generative AI tools, and then is talking about what's called self-plagiarism, right? I think we can call it that, right? So can you cite your own work or something like that? There's interesting, there's interesting things tied to this. So in terms of generative AI tools, right? My response is going to be currently UNZA is still kind of working on this AI policy. You're right in highlighting the fact that generative AI tools are here to stay. My advice is you want to have these conversations with your supervisor. Usually a supervisor has sufficient experience to indicate the extent towards which you can use generative AI tools, right? It's like you saying, I'm working with a student here who's working on the direction of tools and stuff like that. You saying, okay, I have a, I want to, my chosen topic is predicting students at risk of failing computer systems and architecture, right? We've published this stuff here. We've done this study before. Now, in this day and age, right? Literally, what you can do is you can create an effective prompt, is it? Right? And just go to you choose. I mean, you go for your preferred tool of choice here. You know, I quite like Google AI Studio myself because I have more control, fine-grained control over the models that I can use or something like that, right? And most of those models you can use for free, really. But the thing here is you can get this, right? You craft an effective prompt and then you tell this thing, right? You tell this thing to say, and we can make these things up actually, right? We can make things up here. It doesn't matter, I guess. We can experiment with this and make things up here. You can go to this too, right? This doctoral student, you've but why is this happening now? Yes, use. You are currently at concept stage, is it? You're conceptualizing the problem. And because you're funded and you've run out of time here, I hate these dark modes here. I don't know why they like these things by default or something, right? I hate this stuff. What you can do here is you can prompt this actually, and I won't even use the framework for creating an effective prompt here. I'll just say, okay, I'll do a couple of things here. Act as a highly experienced, I'll just say professor or something like that, right? In computer science. I'm just going to give it an action here. Generate a research proposal linked to the topic. This. Okay, this is just an example here. Now, the thing here, right, is you're sitting there and you yourself know, right? It's like nobody, I don't think you were explicitly told to say killing another human being is a bad thing. You know it's bad, right? You do something like this, and I don't know, right? You would know that this is more or less like, I don't know, I would argue here that there's a little bit of plagiarism here, but there are probably certain other schools of thoughts that would feel otherwise, right? So the long and short of it here is what I'm trying to hint at, Mr. Monga and everybody else who is interested in this question is, it's like without the existence of an explicit policy that outlines what you can and cannot do, it becomes difficult like that. Okay, so you want to have conversations with your supervisor and agree on the extent towards which you can use some of these tools. I've had to have very tough conversations with students, and I'll say it here because there's no shame in saying it. I just want to mention names here. Recently, not this year, I think it's last year or before last year or something. I was working with these students, right, that transitioned to part 2. And one of the students, I think, was a bit behind in terms of the proposal. So what he did was he literally just used generative AI to clearly write his literature review. And the way you know this is most of these tools are HouseNet, is it? So they're designed, these are just token generators, right? If you look at the science of LLMs, these are just token generators. And so what they'll do sometimes is they'll generate fictitious content, right? Content that is not pretty factual, like that. So, you check in the references, and because I know that some topics I'm very knowledgeable, right? I know what people are working on because I've been conducting studies in and around such topics for a very long time, right? So I look at these really weird looking references and I look them up, non-existent DOIs, right? I try to search using titles, those things don't exist. So I had to have a very tough conversation, right? And I was reminding him to say, everything that you are doing, right? Yes, ultimately you're doing this because you want to get your master's degree or your PhD, but my name is associated with what you're doing. The last thing that I would want is for people to associate my name with unethical behavior like that, right? So it's about setting the ground rules. So my response to that is, the extent towards which you can use generative AI tools, very, very soon, I think policy will be made available to you. I think it's in draft form. These will be outlined, okay? These tools are here to stay. But also, I think some of the things you can do is take advantage of what publishing houses are doing, right? So a number of publication venues like journals, for instance, will outline the extent towards which you can use AI, right? And most of them will require that you acknowledge the use of AI, right? So it's contextual, really. The very first student that I've graduated who was doing their research in the age of AI, generative AI tools, Malaizo, and I had a really interesting conversation, right? So he was wanting to find out if some of the images in his dissertation can be generated using AI. And, it's like, why not, right? So if you look at his dissertation, especially when he's talking about statistics, background information, he generated some kind of like, I can showcase this, I think, because I have access to his dissertation, and I'll showcase exactly how Malaisio actually ended up acknowledging the fact that those things were generated using AI. Okay, if I can find that stuff by Malaisio, I think it's in data science or something, and thesis. I don't know if I'll be able to find his dissertation. It should be somewhere here. Thesis, and I guess it's in submissions or something like that. Malaisio is this maze of things here. So we sat down at conversations. Of course, we looked up status quo, what is currently prevailing in academia in terms of what people are open to doing insofar as these things are concerned. So you notice in Malaysia's manuscript that I know in the background there's some graphs that he generated using, I think it was Nano Banana or something. I could be wrong here, but I don't know if you removed them because we had some conversation. Some conversations. There we go, right? So something like this here. This is literally generated using Nano Banana. He's just outlining, and there's nothing wrong with this, right? He's trying to explain the framework that he was using. Here's it, the CRISP-DM methodology. And I guess in his infinite wisdom, he decided it would be cooler, I guess, and aesthetically pleasing if he generated something like this. There's a couple of other places like this one as well. This is generated using Nano Banana Pro. The key thing here is he's acknowledging, right? Source generated with Nano Banana, if that makes sense. I don't know if that answers your first question. The other question that I guess you asked here is tied to self-plagiarism, right? Here's the thing. It's an interesting thing, and we'll talk about this because as part of ethical consideration, the thing is, some of these tools that are used to compute. I don't know. I'm going to showcase this at some point. I guess I don't know if I'll be able to do this here, but I might as well academic motions or something. I might as well. We'll talk about this motivation for why people engage in analytical conduct or something like this. But you see, at the UNZA, right? When it comes to research, for you to progress, for you to be promoted, and all those things, there's a key metric that a lot of faculty at UNZA obsess about, and it's called the H-index score. Okay, so your H-index score, in essence, measures the quality of your research. Once upon a time, it used to be that what they would do is they would look at metrics like the number of citations, is it? So if you look at the ranking for University of Zambia lecturers here on Google Scholar, they would look at this, right? The citation. Wow, Dr. Mapoma surpassed Professor Robert Seppo in terms of citations, right? They would look at metrics like this. So how many publications, have you authored or co-authored so far? But it turns out that that's not really an objective measure, is it? So what they do now is they use certain types of objective metrics, and I think you discussed this, Professor Piri, towards the end, right? When it comes to publishing and all those things, how research is evaluated. So the obsession for UNZA now is this metric called the H-index score. So if you look at Professor Mapoma, for instance, in as much as he has a lot of citations, his H-index score is 33. Now, what the 33 means really is, I'm going to simplify this in case you're wondering here. You notice that he has a total of about 87 articles, right? What this means is that out of these 87 articles that he has authored or co-authored, 33 of them have at least 33 citations, if that makes sense. It's about the quality. So in other words, you just order them by, you're ordering them by number of citations, and you're counting them in descending order number of citations. So if we start going down here, we eventually arrive at 33 articles that will have at least 33 citations, ideally. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this here is that because this metric is tied to number of citations, some people will engage in unethical behavior and self-plagiarize extensively. Okay, so they'll self-plagiarize extensively. They'll overdo it. It is normal, it is expected for you to cite previous work that you have done. I do this most of the time. Why? Because the things that I do research-wise are an extension of the things that we've done in the past. So I just don't hop around and do random things over and over again, right? We build up on things that we've done in the past. And so what you begin to notice is that most of my students will cite things that I've done in the past because they're building up on what we've done in the past, right? So I'm pretty sure Malaizo in here cited foundation work that we've done with my very dear colleague, Dr. Ernest Obizul, right? It's like foundation work for our MIZ project, for instance, right? And whenever we are doing research to do with the enterprise medical imaging in Zambia project, depending on what it is we're focusing on, we will cite this foundational work because it's important for people to know where we're coming from, ideally. So it is allowed, you're allowed to do this, right? When it comes to literature review, we will look at how we write. Typically, you use things like in our previous work, we implemented blah 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 or something like that, and then you cite yourself here, right? Like that. So you're allowed to do this, but you don't have to overdo it because you are trying to game the system, if that makes sense. Something like that. I don't know, or something. And so that's plagiarism. Hopefully this makes sense. And then the other thing that we highlighted here is multiple publications, right? And interesting enough, literally yesterday, and usually when I'm saying this, because I'm a researcher like that, when you say something and you don't have a reference point here, people think you're lying or it's hearsay, is it? Literally yesterday, because it says, I guess, literally yesterday we had a meeting for one of our journal, right? Because we're supposed to publish volume 10, issue number 1, and the chief editor, Dr. Walia, is now permanent secretary or something from Chinga province, and so he's had to step down as the chief editor. And so to ensure continuity of the journal itself, the journal is called Zag's List. We're trying to make sure that we don't miss the cycle, okay? So when you're publishing, if you have a publication venue like this, and you tell people that you publish twice in a year, biannually. So in other words, you have 2 issues, right? In any given year, you don't want to miss a cycle. The first cycle for this journal, issue number 1 of in each year, is usually published in June, and then the other one towards the end of the year or something like that. So one of the things we're discussing was this notion that there was is it a conference or something on open science that was held, and the organizers of that conference had expressed interest to have some high quality papers presented at that conference, published in a special issue. So when it comes to publishing, right, in journals, there are instances or times when you can publish what's called a special issue, right? So these are not going to be, and we do this in the Journal of Law, Social Sciences, by the way. We've had special issues published here. I don't know if we've tagged them appropriately here. Yeah, like this, right? A special issue on early childhood education, for instance, right? So it's quite normal like that. But it turns out that when we had this meeting, Dr. Kanyengo highlighted of the fact that the organizers have decided to have this the proceedings published in a different journal. So typically when you have a conference, which we do have as ICICT every year in Zambia, it's like it's the largest, the only, I guess, ICT, computing, informatics centric conference in Zambia. So what we typically do is we'll have people present their work at the conference, right? There are different tracks here. Now, after you finalize the conference, the expectation is you publish what has been presented at the conference, the research presented at the conference, in what is called conference proceedings, right? So you will publish conference proceeding papers. However, high quality papers can be selected and published as extended journal articles, right? So you extend them. And typically the rule of thumb is such that if you're publishing stuff that was already published in conference proceedings, it must have at least, is it 30% newer content. I've done this before. Our work published in, not that it matters here, but our work published in JCDL, been a while here. So this work here, right, which we published in 2021, was extended. We were invited to extend this into a journal article. So this is an extension of this. Some content which you find in here, you will find in here, but there's newer ideas in here, an extension of what we have here, if that makes sense. I don't know, maybe not. But what we're trying to say here is that it turns out that it is, the reason I was talking about the 30% threshold of newer content here is it is considered unethical, or you'd be engaging in unethical conduct if you do your research as a PhD student. You're doing your research and you publish, let's say, in the Zambia ICT journal, boom, right? You get that same work, you submit it elsewhere, and you have it published as well. That is unethical conduct. This is what we are calling multiple publications. Okay, so you find a sort of situation where for these major publication venues like conferences, top tier conferences, one of the conditions for submitting work there will be that you must not have submitted the work anywhere else. Of course, there are certain exceptions, right? Like preprints, for instance. So they will allow you to dump your work on a preprint server like Archive, for instance. It's expected in computing for you to do that, right? Because sometimes when you're publishing these journal articles, the amount of time it takes between submission and publishing can be quite lengthy. And so because of that, they will allow you to publish work which has not yet been peer reviewed on preprint servers like Archive. I don't know if you've come across Archive. It's a classic preprint server, right? The idea is you do your research, even when your work has been submitted for review, you can dump it on a preprint server like this so that people can already start reading about your work. It may be rejected on the other, side here, but I guess the idea here is to make sure that people have quick access to the research that you have conducted. And maybe just to try and exemplify this, right? I'll use an example here of, I don't know here. I think it's this, right? This is good. I think this is what I want to use as an example. I don't know. I'll try and see if I can find these details here, so that you appreciate the importance of this lag that exists. Is it because when you and I don't know if I'm the one who's going to do this or if it's Professor Piri really, but when you are when you I'm trying to see history published online. This is quite unfortunate. I can't find the details that I'm looking for here. Maybe I'll find it on here. It's not on the ACM website, but who knows, right? I think I should be able to find it here. There we go. So look at this, right? So this work, right? When I was conceptualizing this, I submitted this work. Here's the thing. I submitted this article, right, for publication on the 17th of November in 2019. Okay, so I submitted. And typically when, just to give you a bit of context here, when you're submitting work to a journal, right, it undergoes a series of stages, is it? You have a submission, you have what's called review. Of course, there'll also be like a desk review or something like that, right? This would be like your peer review or something like that. Peer review, there's copy editing, right? And then there's production or something like that. A number of things are taking place in all these different stages, right? You know, desk review, they're checking that your submission conforms to house styles. You know, they're checking that it's of appropriate length and all those things. Has it been blinded? If it's a double blind, if the journal articles undergo or submissions undergo double blind review, and all those things, right? In this peer review process, it's a lengthy. It takes a long time, right? All of these different stages here take a long time. So if you look at this journal article that I submitted it in November, right? Excuse me, 2019. Only after a year was it accepted. If you notice, it's like October 2020. They say we've accepted it. And there's a couple of things that are going on here. They accept it, they say, well, maybe sometimes it'll be subject to these proposed changes from the reviewers or something, right? Or there's a deadlock with the reviewers and all those things. So you make those changes and then it will be copy edited. There's a back and forth. There'll be an editor, a copy editor who will reach out to you and ask you to, typically you receive an email similar to this, right? We are supposed to have stuff published. I guess stuff's published here recently. So you receive an email similar to this, right? Proofs. So you, after changes are made by copy editor, and we'll go through this process as part of literature review. I know because you need to understand the publishing workflow in academia. Some of you, I guess, depending on where you work, you may need to understand this because the number of universities that are interested in software that is designed to mimic this sort of workflow, right? Of course, open source tools like OJS, which we always uses, so it mimics this publication workflow. But anyway, so the long and short of it is that these stages take a long time, okay? Now, because they take a long time, and again, I want to draw attention to this, I don't know where it is here, but to this thing here, example, right? So we submit in 2019, a year later it's accepted, and then only 4 months after is it published, right? So if you look at the turnaround time between submission and publishing here, it's quite lengthy, right? And research becomes stale. And this is the point that you need to appreciate, by the way, especially those of you that will more likely, sadly, decide to pause for a little while. You start your PhD and then a year down the line, something major comes up, you start neglecting your work, right? Before you know it, it's 5 years down the line and you're still busy with your research. Well, the things that were relevant in 2026 are certainly not going to be relevant, right? In 2030. You know, and I have a number of students that have done this, you know, especially if you're working on things to do with AI. like you start in 2021 or 2023, I guess, is an example of a student. And then you come back 2 years down the line or 3 years down the line, say, I want to restart. Well, the things that made sense then don't make sense right now, right? You are singing about using classical machine learning here, we are foundation models now. So you have to make radical changes here. So, but the long and short of it is that research, especially in fields like computing, becomes still very, very quickly, right? So instead of waiting more than a year before your work is published, what you do is you can dump this work on a preprint server, okay? So in essence, you are publishing a preprint before it's actually published by the publisher. Generally, these things would be outlined in your copyright statement. So when you're publishing, I guess we are trying to kill multiple birds with one stone here. When you are publishing, what typically happens, I'll showcase examples of some of the things that we've done. You give away copyright access, right? When you're giving away copyright access, some of the things that the new copyright holder is going to do is they're going to outline the extent towards which you can reuse ideas in that paper. So observe, there'll be things like, I know people don't really pay particular attention to this, but these are important things to, I'm looking for administration here, important things to take into account here, right? So a typical licensing agreement, like in our case, it's between us and these guys here, right? I think they talk about preprint somewhere. I hope, I don't know, so zoom out, zoom in out, or something like that. I don't know if there's mention of the preprint here, but I'm not really sure. We don't really have to talk about the preprints here, but so you notice here, the author may make the submitted manuscript available at any time, if you notice here, right? Okay, but this is different. It's not really, they're telling you to say, once this is accepted. But some, we recently submitted work to learning, is that learning analytics, journal of learning analytics? I think it is. We submitted work here recently. And so if you look at the author guidelines here, you'll notice that I'm trying to get to the part where we're talking about preprint here. Author guidelines, I think, is where we'll find preprint. Okay, looks like it's not here. I guess, I don't know, but it should be. I thought. There we go. So is it possible, if it's under frequent asked questions, FAQ, is it possible to submit papers that have already appeared on preprint server? The answer is yes. So this is like standard practice, especially in computing, because they know, they understand, right? That the turnaround time between submission and publication is quite lengthy like that. You'd want your ideas to diffuse so that people already know that you've already done work in that particular area. Okay, so the long and short of it here is that it is unethical to publish the same paper in multiple venues. It's only one venue. The only exception here is like a preprint or something like that, right? It is also unethical, and this also includes things like, I'm just going to change the title or change the abstract, but the underlying theme or the idea is the same. That is unethical behavior, which you must avoid. When people discover that you behave that way, you'll be frowned upon, you know, they will refuse to collaborate with you, right? That's how life works here. So it is unethical to publish, you know, multiple similar papers. It is unethical to submit the same or very similar paper, right, to more than one journal conference at the same time. Choose one. And this behavior of, there's this trick that academics use, is it? Where, because you know that as part of the peer review process, this is crucial, is it? You will get feedback. So what some people do is they'll use this process to, you know that you're not even going to submit it to the journal of the Zambia ICT journal, for instance, but you're submitting it because you want to get feedback, right? You get that feedback, you make alterations, that you submit it to a better publication venue. That's unethical behavior, right? You don't do that. Anyways, so there we go, right? So if more than one paper is published as a result of a single piece of research, you should have a unique idea So I'll give you an example of what most of you are doing, right? The underlining theme centered around your master's dissertation or your master's thesis or your doctoral thesis is going to be the same, right? But there will be isolated, there will be differences in the things that you're doing. So a typical doctoral student journey will involve something like a systematic literature review, right? What some students will do is this will result in a paper or a publication, right? So it's like a meta-analysis or something like that. I'm co-supervising a student who is currently working towards a systematic literature review. They want to publish. And it's kind of like a trick that you can use, right? Because you must remember that for you to graduate, for you to graduate, you must, you must publish, if you're a doctoral student, at least 2 peer-reviewed articles. And this can be hard here, right? Because if you look at the stringent or the constraints here of where you can publish it, it's not always easy for you to publish. To meet this, what you do is you can start off with a paper that is just going to be a meta-analysis, right? So you embed yourself in into this phase where you are reading up on what people have done relative to what you want to do, and then afterwards you publish a review paper. What you would have done then is you only have to worry about this other paper that you need to publish for you to graduate. And typically this can be based on maybe one of the major objectives, right? If that makes sense. What some students will do is they'll plan their work in such a way that you do a systematic review, and then objective 1 is going to result in a paper. Objective 2 is going to result in a paper, right? Objective 3 is going to result in a paper as well. So that you go over and beyond, is it? We've this student I was working with master's student because he's doing a master's by research. The only thing he needed to do here is he just needed to publish his work in just one peer-reviewed paper for masters, right? By research, if you will. So, but he went over and beyond the call of duty, right? So if you look at some of the things we have here, I guess if I look at my profile or something like that, you begin to notice that most recent work we've done, these guys have published actually. This has published as well. I didn't know that. This is the same as this, by the way. This is the same as this. It's a duplicate. The way Google Scholar works, anyway, we're not here to discuss Google Scholar. But what Malaisio Zumara has done is done quite a bit here. So he published 1, 2, I think it's supposed to be a 3rd publication or something. And it was just a master's by research. Really brilliant student, one of the probably most intelligent students I've worked with so far, research students. But good at almost everything, is it? The research part, the writing, and just I guess high IQ or something like that. But yeah, so you want to take into account these things, is it? Multiple publication venues. Don't fall into this trap. I know most of you may fall into this trap. If you're caught wanting, it may be disastrous, is it? For me to graduate, I need 2 articles, but you only have 1, right? And this is what? This is like November. I want to graduate in May, and I have to publish this in a peer-reviewed article. What do? I'm just going to go to the paper I published and then just make some changes in the abstract and maybe in the introduction, but everything else is the same, right? That is an ethical conduct. You mustn't do that. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. I guess just to mention here that typically pressure associated with promotion is one of the reasons why people do this, you know. For me to be promoted, I'm now senior lecturer. I want to be associate professor for whatever reason here. I don't know why. I want to be an associate professor, but guess what? For me to be, what is that here? For me to be associate professor, I need an H index of, look at this. This is the ONSA promotion tool. Right? I need an H index of 8. Huh. I need an 8, but I have 9 now, I guess again. But I have maybe less than 8. What am I going to do here? Okay. I'm just going to, and research takes a while, right? You can't just say, I'll do, I guess there's some fields where you can do your research, I guess, in 1 month or something, or 1 day. In computing, it takes a while, is it? You have to build software, you do a baseline studies and stuff like that, right? You do an evaluation of the tool or something. So it takes a while before you can actually publish. Months, actually, of intense work, right? Of meetings and all those things. So because of the pressure you have, you want to be promoted, what do? You start gaming the system, is it? You start making things up. That is considered an unethical behavior. But also, in academia, it's quite common, or rather the normal thing to do when you're conducting research is you apply for funding. Okay, so you respond to this call for papers, call for funding. They'll tell you, we'll give you X amount of money, and for you to qualify, just prepare a proposal on an idea, and then you must also provide details of X number of most recent publications, which must be aligned by this focus area or something. So because you have fewer publications, what you do, you start gaming the system. So these are some of the reasons why why some people would actually decide to engage in this particular form of unethical behavior. This, I guess, applies to me and also to you, is it? For you to graduate, if you're a doctoral student, you need to publish at least 2 peer-reviewed articles. So you may be forced to engage in this sort of unethical behavior. Okay. Is any thoughts here? The other form of unethical behavior here is accusations, right, of unethical conduct, is it? Just mention here that when you engage in an unethical research practice here, you're going to be putting your research career at risk here, your reputation and perhaps your institution's reputation. Although sometimes most of these things will be hashed here, but at the very, maybe at the worst, maybe what will happen is people will avoid you like the plague, is it? Because rumors, this sort of rumors will go around rather quickly, right? People will know that you behave in a certain type of way when you collaborate with other people, right? If that makes sense, I don't know if that makes sense. So really, what we're saying here is that you have certain instances where cases of academic dishonesty may become known outside the confines of your research lab, or your collaborators, or even your institution, right? And sometimes the cases, I've heard of certain cases that have ended up in the courts of law at UNZA, cases to do with accusations of unethical behavior. Usually these are linked to money. I don't know what our society has become. There's something wrong with our society here. It's, especially when it comes to monetary incentives, right? People do very, very strange things here. You siphon money, you're making things up here, right? No, we as part of this research, we did project management, and these are the number of hours, but it's totally untrue. It's just made up, right? Before you know it, you're taken to the courts of law or something. And there have been serious cases because there's some research projects at UNZA that bring in millions of dollars, yeah, where even vehicles are purchased, yeah, brand new vehicles for field work and all those things. Some people have ended up apparently reportedly personalizing those things, and so they've ended up in the courts of law or something like that. Anyways, but just to mention here that there are other consequences here associated with accusations as they relate to unethical behavior here, right? So if you're a researcher or established researcher, your students may, or potential students may actually avoid you, right? Because when you're a doctoral student, the normal thing to do, and I know most of our students don't do this, the normal thing to do is you research the people in the department where you're applying into, okay? And when you do that, you have informal conversations with a potential supervisor. That's what they're called, is it? I want to do this. Are you willing to supervise me or something like that? Now, when students discover, and usually what students will do is they'll look you up. That's the normal thing to do. This is what I did when I was doing my master's and my PhD, right? You look people up, potential supervisors. You look at the students they've supervised. Are there any scandals or something on the internet and stuff like that? So this has implications and consequences to potential future students, and in fact, even your current students, right? But also collaborators, is it? The people that you collaborate with. It's rarely the case in 2026 that you work alone as a researcher. You collaborate with other people, like-minded individuals that share the research interests that you have, for instance. There are also consequences aligned with the people that are funding your study, right? The implications, they're giving you money to do that work and you're engaging in ethical behavior, the implications on your funders here. But also, the implications when you engage in unethical behavior on these publication venues, where exactly you're going to end up publishing your work, right? So that's that in terms of, I guess, some of the implications that may be there. But just to mention here that when you have so-called accusations of unethical behavior, there's usually a process that you'd have to follow, is it, to ensure that there's I guess people are treated fairly, if you will. Okay, and what you want to do here is ensure that when you're the one who's making an accusation here, if you're the one making an accusation, somebody, you want to make sure that the accused person is only informed of the potential problem after a preliminary investigation is conducted, right? So a place like UNZA, for instance, will have a disciplinary committee. I think it's important for me to showcase these things here, showcase the seriousness of this insofar as UNZA is concerned here. Just try and see if I can find policies here. This. I don't know if I'll be able to find, I don't know if it's even here. Staff disciplinary, yeah, this is what I wanted, right? So there's at UNZA, right? If there's a serious accusation to do with unethical behavior or unethical conduct, there's a process, right? You're given due process here. This is the beauty with academia, right? You just don't do things randomly here. Maybe I should maybe just start off with highlighting the implications here of dishonest, academic dishonest. That's page number 7, to showcase how serious this is it? Number 7. I guess, I don't know. This is page number 4, 5, 6, 7. This is here. Right? So issues to do with academic dishonesty include things like I don't know why this is coming here. Right, bribery, corruption, but I want to focus on the issues that are to do with research. And I think, I hope I still have my connection. I'm going to pause here for you to all, because I suddenly cannot see myself on. Yep, I knew it. I've lost connectivity here. So what I'm going to do is attempt to I tend to reconnect here. Sorry about that. I lost connection. I couldn't see myself from my mobile device, and I realized that I had lost. Thumbs up if you can hear me. Please. So sorry about that. I think things should be fine now. It's a bit of an issue there. Sorry, there was a lag, and then I lost connectivity. And I think I'm still experiencing some really weird thing because I suddenly cannot share my screen again. Just give me a minute or so as we are transitioning here. Let me just try and see if I can switch connections again. Colleagues, I am terribly sorry for that long break in transmission. I guess as well, it's almost like in the halfway mark here. There's a nice way of having an implicit break. Kindly asking for maybe confirmation if you can still hear me now, and also if you can see my screen. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much for that. Right. So I mean, so I was about to showcase something, right? To say, at the University of Zambia, right? We have this there's this thing here. It's called it's a policy. It's called the staff disciplinary and grievance procedure code. Okay, it's important because issues to do with disciplinary action obviously are linked to a broad spectrum of things, and not only the issues that we're discussing here as part of ethical consideration. Remember, we're looking at issues, right, in as they relate to research ethics here, right? So we're looking at accusations of unethical conduct here. And the point we're trying to stress is that make sure that the first point here, the accused patient should only be informed of the potential problem after a preliminary investigation has been conducted. And if there's a valid case that exists, otherwise you don't inform them. And I was trying to latch on to the fact that the University of Zambia has this policy, right? And this policy, you notice that some of the issues that are being outlined here, the things that, come on now, are the things that we've been discussing, right? Like plagiarism, okay? Like, okay, this is nothing to do with research, authorizing students to write exams, research-centric regulation. I'm looking for research-centric things here. I guess this, right? Fraud, is it? Failure to comply with consultants and research regulations. Now, there's a procedure here, right? And the procedure at the UNS, this is a category, come back, category 4 here, right? Offense. So if you come to penalties here, category 4 offense, which mostly will link to the things we're talking about here. When we come back here. You see this? Misappropriation of funds, right? So you have research funding and you start siphoning that money. There's nothing like first warning, written warning, and all those things. It's instant dismissal, right? This is how serious the university takes these things. And in fact, because these has serious implications, there's a procedure that has got to be followed, right? Misappropriation of funds. I guess you have some funding and then you start lying to say we worked for the whole year, 12 months, working Monday through to Sunday through to Saturday, right? 7 days in a week. How? Right? 8 hours. How? Just so we can get more money. That's misappropriation of funds here. If you're found wanting the first time, that's negative. But look at this, right? This is how the UNZA takes plagiarism seriously. Now, you see that in the guidelines, so the things that are to do with students, it's an outright fail, is it? If you're engaging in plagiarism, right? It's outright fail. You saw that? I don't know if you, it's an outright fail. It's here now. But if you're a member of staff, I mean, you can't fail, I guess, if you're a member of staff, you're fired, right? It's instant dismissal, like that. So you want to be very careful here. And it's the reason why I take this seriously also. But it's about ethics also. Anyways, so that's that, right? There's a process. It's usually a process for handling accusations. And typically these higher education institutions or research institutes will have these processes clearly stipulated in black and white. Okay, so the outcome of preliminary investigations should ideally determine which parties may be affected, right? If Lighton is found engaging in plagiarism, not in this life though, I don't think it will ever happen, there are implications on my students, right? Because I'm supervising students. If I'm dismissed, so the UNZA has got to look into what are the implications here? Which parties are affected? Well, Lighton supervises masters and PhD students and fourth year students. What are we going to do with them, right? Well, what about the current running projects, right? We have projects that are running right now. I've been fired from the UNZA. I can't continue acting as maybe PI or something or co-PI, okay? So you look at the implications ideally. And also, during these preliminary investigations, the person who is being accused has a right, to protection and due process. So you just don't assume that just because somebody has been accused of plagiarism or misappropriation of funds and they're guilty, right? The due process of the law has got to kick in here. And obviously, the identity of the person who has reported the case must be kept confidential. This is the reason why the UNZA, and I imagine most of these organizations we work for actually, but most higher education institutions will have the whistleblower policy. So I think there's a whistleblower policy. There's a whistleblower policy for the UNZA, right? Where because you must think here, and if you notice something wrong and you keep quiet, you notice that your colleague, is cheating, they are plagiarizing work. You don't keep quiet, is it? You must report, right? When you report, the idea is you must have processes in place that are going to protect the identity of the person who is reporting, right? The potentially guilty party here. But anyways, so there's that here. A point to note here is that since this impact of misconduct or unethical conduct here is so great, anyone who becomes aware of such behavior has a duty to report it, including you. If you are working with your supervisor and you notice that your supervisor is forcing you to publish results that have nothing to do with experiments that you're conducting because maybe your supervisor wants to publish in this high impact journal, report your supervisor, say no to that, right? Okay. It turns out that most and I know it's hard for you, I guess, you must report them. And probably if I were you report them, or at the very least, if you're scared, because in our culture, right? Our culture is so horrible. You see bad things happen and you don't want to report those people, right? If you see a bad thing happen, you must report it. And I think I must use myself as an example here. Not that I've done something bad here, but I noticed something happening to some of my courses when I just joined the UNZA, changing of grades. I reported that person who was doing that, right? I don't care what they think about me, right? It's about doing the right thing here, right? Anyways, so the point here is that many institutions will appoint officials, a committee that will be in charge of research ethics. This is the reason why we have these 3 research ethics committees, right? And usually, if you notice something iffy, the first place you should go to is you go to NASREC or ZABREC or HSS-REC, ideally. I wanted to mention something here to say, at the UNZA, right? You shouldn't think that just because this person is a lecturer and he's been assigned by supervisor, then you must bow to them or something. Of course, I mean, you have to behave a certain way when you're interacting with people. It goes both ways, right? The supervisor and the student or something. But you have every right, right? Whatever the reason here, maybe they're engaging in unethical conduct and you don't want to report them. What you should do at the very least is disengage. And how do you disengage at the UNZA? What you do is you fill in this form here, okay? There's this form here. You go to UNZA PG Form 8, you fill it in. You can make up a reason if you want to, but you tell the department or the school to say, I want to be assigned a different supervisor because I'm not happy with this supervisor. Okay, but I don't think you'd say because he's engaged in unethical behavior or something, but you want to use a whistleblower policy to report them or something. But you must report them, right? Ethics. Okay, so that's accusations on in terms of these issues and considerations, talking about accusations and unethical conduct. I don't know if people have experiences or maybe you don't have to say it's my experience, but I have heard or something of unethical behavior. Or for the PhD students, did you engage in unethical behavior when you were doing your master's? You sat somewhere behind a tree because there was no ChatGPT then. You sat behind a tree and you started filling in the questionnaires yourself. Please share your thoughts, I suppose. But I don't know if we can, but we can report you also. I don't know. Any thoughts about this? I was just trying to have some lighthearted talk. So, yeah, I don't know. So there's also this issue of institutional responsibilities, is it? It turns out really that these higher education institutions or research institutes like ZARI, for instance, right? They'll come up or they'll frame codes of conduct for research practice. And the reason why they'll come up with these codes of conduct is to safeguard against these issues. So for the UNZA, for instance, I just showed you 2 policies, and there are a number of other policies that feed into what we're talking about here. There's a whistleblower policy, there's a staff disciplinary and grievance, code of conduct. There's a research policy, right? In fact, recently, I think you may have received that email that was sent by public relations. You must take this thing serious because, you learn a lot by not just attending class, but by also paying particular attention to what is happening, right? Recently, the UNZA told us that they have new policies that have been published. This was some 2 days, on the 22nd here, right? So there's a new policy, an open science policy, boom, right? I don't know about this publishing, binding, printing services policy. I don't know about that here. But there's also a research data management policy, right? What else is that? Research and Innovation Awards policy, I guess. I don't know what this is here. Right? And then there's a scholarly communication and publication policy. I know I was part of the committee that was involved in this also. So you want to take a keen interest in these things, right? So that you understand what goes on in academia or something. For some of you, especially those of you that work for government entities or parastatals, if you don't have these things, you can replicate what is being done at the UNZA, right? So that you get at that same stage, ideally. Anyways, the long and short of it here is that you typically have these codes of conduct here to safeguard against these issues that we've been raising, we've been discussing. And the idea here is codes of conduct to provide protection for the people that are accused of unethical conduct, right? And also those that have reported unethical behavior, right? They'll also reduce the risk of the institution resorting to the courts of law. So I imagine there are instances where I think certain individuals have resorted to suing the UNZA, right? Because they've passed through some ad hoc disciplinary committee and they're not happy with that. But what the UNZA does is, before you resort to taking that case to the courts of law, you handle the case internally, right? And you point to policy and guidelines that exist. Okay, so research institutions will typically appoint a body, to give confidential advice in cases of suspected misconduct. Typically, I think these are ad hoc disciplinary committees that are formed. So they will typically choose, for the cases we've been discussing, they will choose renowned academics in the university. So the professors or the associate professors, right? If that makes sense. So the other point to note here on issues and consideration here, the things that you need to be aware of as a researcher here insofar as ethical conduct is concerned here. You're expected to know and adhere to sound ethical practice as you are engaging in your research, obviously. This is the things we've been discussing, right? So issues to do with honesty and truthfulness, privacy and confidentiality. The expectation is that when you're conducting research at this level, or after you are done here, if you do research at your workplace, you must adhere to these things we're discussing, right? You must be honest in the way you're doing things. You must get ethical clearance approval before you conduct research, right? You must take into account privacy and confidentiality of your participants. Case in point, myself, Professor Walia from Geography, Bridget Walia, I think there's Hope, there's Davis as well. We are trying to better understand what is currently happening at the UNZA, right? We went on recess and then we started these online interactions, teaching and learning. There've been complaints from students and lecturers. And so what we've done is we've carved out a research problem, right? But the thing here is that one of the things we're going to be doing is we're going to be collecting data from students, from staff, and from logs, usage logs from Moodle. We have access to students. We have access to staff. I have access to Moodle. We just cannot go there and start designing questionnaires and and launching the questionnaire and conducting interviews. No, right? We are going through the same process that you are expected to go through. We are in the process of applying for ethical clearance approval, NASREC. We are in the process of approaching CICT to get to ask them to give us access to Moodle logs, because I only have access to Moodle sites from the Department of Computing and Informatics, right? So we're following the due process here, procedure, okay? It turns out that it's assumed that a typical researcher, a person like you actually, when you're doing your research as a doctoral student, as a master's student, it is assumed that you are aware of your responsibilities, right, towards the profession and the public, right? So the expectation is supposed to be ethical. You're supposed to conduct your research ethically, ideally. As you are conceptualizing the idea, as you are documenting existing literature as part of literature review, as you are designing your experiment, as you are reporting, you're doing all of these things ethically. They make this assumption, right? We are assuming that you are doing the right thing before you do any data collection, you first of all get ethical clearance approval. You're not doing anything before you get ethical clearance approval. Otherwise, you're doing the wrong things. And it may be a bit of a problem. There's some cases that came up, I must say this. There are some cases that came up in the most recent postgraduate, school postgraduate committee meeting, right? Why do we have students that are presenting at the postgraduate seminar week when their ethical clearance approval has not been granted and all those things? Anyhow, as a researcher, you should only participate in work which you are competent to do, ideally. The expectation is that you are here, I guess, I don't know. So just to put things in perspective here, entities like the NHRIA, the National Health Research Authority, UNZABREC, ZREC, I don't know which other ethical clearance approval, research ethics committees exist out there, really. But they'll provide a code of ethics for their members or for individuals that are interested in getting approval from them. And more importantly, most higher education institutions or most research institutions will have existing policies that govern any existing conflicts of interest, for instance, right? In order to protect the integrity and public confidence, right, in the research that they conduct. This is, in fact, the reason why the UNZA has all of these policies that I was highlighting, right? It's wanting to protect itself as an entity, its reputation, right? So that people have full trust in what they do. We should take these things seriously. Sometimes, in most instances, right, there's little policing that happens, but when you are found wanting, you will be used as an example. So it's best to just follow the rules, I guess. I don't know. There's no harm in following the rules here. So I don't have any thoughts here, but that's just important discussion. Another consideration on issue when it comes to research ethics is peer review safeguards here, right? The point behind peer review is it's essentially the process that precedes the publication. Not all publications. You know how in academia you have different types of publications, is it? I don't know if you remember your literature review here, but if you're in academia, you can publish what? You can publish manuscript, right? If you start with a student thesis or dissertation, manuscript, right? You can publish a technical report, right? Maybe your work is resulting into policy, and you're working in conjunction with the Ministry of Technology and Science. You can come up with a technical report, right? What else? For some of you, your supervisors will encourage you to publish book chapters. I don't know if you publish books here as a PhD student. I don't know. What else? Well, you can publish. We're talking about scholarly research output here. I'll call this scholarly research output or something. Research output. You can publish conference proceedings paper. You attend a conference, they publish the research that you presented. Okay. What else? You can publish. This is a high value publication, or I guess high valued publication type here, a journal article as well, right? Now, it turns out that some of the things that you do undergo a peer review process. In other words, there are experts in the field that are going to be identified to look at what you are wanting to get published. And generally, this typically takes place in academia, right? Conference proceeding papers or conferences and journal articles. One would argue that, well, maybe even a thesis because you have examiners or something, but you can get my point here. I guess you could say even here, maybe not, but we are fishing here. But it's usually these two here. When you're writing a book, nobody's going to peer review that book, right? When you're writing a book chapter, you'll be identified as an expert, and you're invited to write a chapter for that book. That's it. Technical report, nobody reviews it. But experts are identified. Now, the way peer review works is that there's a couple of interesting things. I guess we'll talk about this in more detail when we start looking at literature review. Also, we'll revisit this. We'll also look at the workflow so that you understand here. But usually, right, they'll get an odd number of people to review the work. Okay, so usually 3, 5, but usually it's 3, so that when there's a disagreement, you go with a majority or something. That's how this works. Okay, so odd number of people. That's one thing to take into account. What else? Well, there's going to be a decision on how this peer review works. Like typically, it's called double blind. So this idea that author and reviewers do not know each other, right? What's blinding here? In some instances, it would be single blind, right? Where author does not know, but reviewer does. Or it can be open review process, where both parties know who, right? Who is involved. And really true to that, if you got your typical publication venue, I'm going to use an example of our exemplar journal here, the Journal of Agricultural and Biomedical Sciences, Zuza Jobs. You notice that in the guidelines for authors, they will tell you to say, this journal uses a double-blind review process. Double-blind, right? Meaning that you will not, and you will not know who is who. And the idea is simple, I guess. It's like, if you don't know who is reviewing or who wrote the paper, you are less likely to be biased. Although the argument that some people present is academics, for the most part, are objective, and there won't be any favoritism and all those things. I guess, I don't know. But anyway, so that's the whole point of a peer review process, and we'll discuss this in great detail during the literature review. But it turns out that this is a very powerful way of ensuring that researchers are thorough and careful, right, when you're conducting and presenting their work. Because it turns out that as part of that peer review process, what those three experts will do is they will poke holes into ethical consideration, for instance, your methodology and all those things. Okay? And the other thing here is that the importance of peer review here is that it ensures that an identical or similar technique is used, right, to prove conclusions, ideally. So you set up a standard in the way that you're evaluating work that people are kind of engaging in here. Okay. So just a point to note here, right? Important issue when it comes to research ethics, this notion that before research is actually publicly made available, typically there are experts that will look at it, right? Now this has implications on publishing, is it? There's a reason why. This is the reason why in here, in the guidelines, they will tell you that you must only, but why? You must only publish work in a peer, if you're a doctoral student, we're going to go to the doctoral students here, publish at least one, not by publication here. They're saying something important here. They're telling you that you are only going to publish in a peer-reviewed journal, right? Of course, there's even impact factor or something like that. So meaning that they're going to have some certain level of trust that you conducted your research ethically and the things that you wrote here make sense. Okay. There's other things that they have thrown around here to do with publishing, right? All articles published in predatory journals shall not be considered. You know, it's a disease, this unethical conduct in academia. You know, in the process of chasing promotions and funding, people will publish their work in even suspicious venues, right? So a publication venue where you publish, not where Lighton was published. Okay, I can put myself on the pedestal here. Not where I published in 2019, I submit in 2019, but my work only gets published in 2021, right? But predatory journals work in such a way that you submit today, tomorrow they publish. As long as you pay that $200 or something, $100. You know, it's fraud at its best, but that's neither here nor there, I guess. Okay, so this issue of peer review safeguards, very important when it comes to research ethics. What else? I guess it becomes important for us to talk about, overall research results and the general public here, right? We as researchers have a duty, right, to consider or to take into account societal implications, right, in the things that we are doing. Well, we conducted a census as researchers, right? And we discovered that, I don't know if you colleagues remember that, the Zambia Demographic Household Survey. We've discovered that the fertility rate in Zambia is 4. Well, I mean, you have a duty to make sure that you're doing the right thing so that those numbers that you're reporting are accurate, because those have implications on what government is going to do, right, policy-wise. There's a reason why, research is the reason why we've seen things like, we shall increase social cash transfer money or something. I don't know if there's something here. Because you've done research, I guess. I don't know what that is. We are scaling up or something. If you're doing the wrong things here, government is going to end up losing money or something, right? What else? Well, we're going to use language of instruction. Language of instruction for grade 1 to 5 in Zambia is now going to be in local languages, right? Right? This is informed by research. So if you did the wrong things here, then you begin to notice that the efficacy or the effectiveness of using Kichewa or Silozi or Ichitonga, Chivemba and all those things, I mean, it's not going to be there. It might just turn out that English is actually even better or something like that. I don't know. By the way, you know, there's a study, one of the studies that was done, preliminary studies that was done to do with language of instruction here, local languages. You can look at before they even introduce this. People do studies like this. Anyways, so it's important, right? There are societal implications. I always use this as an example, right? If you look at the BNNB, the Basic Needs and Nutrition Basket, it used to be the Basic Needs Basket, right? But it's BNNB. There's an extra N for nutrition. Every day, every time this is produced, right? Have you noticed how the Zambian watchdog, right, will tear it apart, right? But where is it now? They always anyway, they always shoot JCTR here. JCTR claims that the cost of living in JCTR, the cost of living. Zambian watchdog Facebook. I don't know. I wanted to find the cost of living is 12,000. I'm like, okay, I've done work with JCTR, so I know what they do, right? I'm like, the procedure that they follow, right, to conduct research, and it's not really like difficult research here, right? It's just basic data collection here. It's a survey. They'll tell you, right? For Chipata, we go to the market. We went to Saturday market, on Avutika market, and the way we sample is, this is how we sample. We get the prices. We average out. This is how we come up with these things. But you look at people and they're refusing, right? They're refusing the fact that it's expensive in Lusaka. But also I think people have a misrepresentation. Why do we have apples on the on this survey of theirs or something? Well, nutrition, is it? Okay, that's fine. I think I'm sounding like I'm being biased towards JCTI here. But I'm trying to, I don't know. Okay, so the research results ideally should not be disclosed to the general public, right? Before the peer review process, ideally, right? Prior publication is important here. Before you start making these pronouncements, no, we've conducted research and party A is going to win in August. What research did you conduct? Okay, but I don't know if polling is considered classic research here, but you get the point, right? You want to make sure that the results are vetted by experts. Okay, so it is irresponsible for you to broadcast findings without having them screened first, right? For quality control, ideally. Especially when it comes to these controversial results here. All right, so you want to be very careful here, otherwise people start misrepresenting things here or facts. Don't know. I don't know about quality control here as it relates to Zambia here, but another thing to mention as it relates to research ethics here issues is data availability, is it? The world is changing. Increasingly, the expectation is that you just don't publish your research. Say, well, we conducted a study, we developed this blockchain powered application, we tested it, and it's the best thing ever, right, in the whole wide world or something like that, right? The expectation is that alongside the publications, alongside your research output, you're supposed to submit data. And incidentally, colleagues, this is the reason why one of the new policies for the UNZA is research data management policy. So very, very soon, we're going to have a situation where, I imagine, I don't know what's in the policy here, when you're graduating, it's common, it's standard practice elsewhere, such that you're not just submitting your thesis manuscript, you're also submitting data, okay, that was used, right, to publish that manuscript. So we're probably going to see a situation where going forward, students will be expected to submit even CSV files, right, of their raw data or something like that. In fact, it's the reason why you have places like Zenodo or something, Zenodo, right? This is where these data repositories where people can freely publish research data or something. But also, I think you can do this Mendeley data publishing or something. On Mendeley, I think they can. They have a data repository. It's called Mendeley Data or something like that. I don't know, but since Elsevier purchased it, I don't know if this is still active. I don't know. So it's becoming common. In fact, it's even more interesting because in computing, typically, most of the things that we do will result in generation of a completely new data set. You can produce what's called a data article, right? You can publish a data article. There are a number of publication venues where you essentially can publish. You can write about how the data was actually created, ideally, and then you share the data itself. Rather than just dumping it on Kerg or something like that, you can, yeah, I guess. Anyway, so the idea here is the research data used in published work should be made available. It's supposed to be made available to other researchers so that they can reuse the data, so that they can poke holes in what you did, right? Or discuss, the research as it relates to the data itself. But also, the data should be preserved in the event or stored over a long period of time. In the event that there are complaints or accusations following a publication, so you can easily roll back and look at the data. I wish I could say I think I converted my data into thing, especially as it relates to when I did my doctoral studies, as it relates to the surveys that I'd conducted or something. I was using paper-based questionnaires, but I think I had the raw data somewhere, Typically, research institutions or higher education institutions will provide guidelines on research data management. And surprise, surprise, the University of Zambia has recently launched, right, as of 2026, this is 2028, the research data management policy. And if you take a look at don't know if there's a table of contents here, but there we go, right? So in here, it will probably outline important things like ownership and access rights to the data or the data repository itself. How the data is secured, is it? Because you may have personal identifying information. Incidentally, the project that I worked on with JCTR resulted in what's called DAMS platform. I don't know if JCTR. I don't know if the DAMS platform is running. It usually goes down. We implemented a DAMS platform. Don't know. But anyway, so the DAMS platform implements. It's meant to. It's meant to manage the research data cycle ideally. Okay, DAMS platform is down or something. So we built infrastructure that helps JCTR to essentially manage the data. And the reason JCTR did this incidentally is because the world is changing now. Most funders will require that you have a research data management policy before they can give you funding, right? So essentially this. Anyways, so enforcement of security. Oh, and I had this nice diagram here, which is quite nice. Okay, so if you look at your typical research data management lifecycle, it actually talks or it speaks to the so-called FAIR principles. Your data must be findable. People must easily find the data. It should be accessible, right? So you provide URLs, persistent URLs, and all those things. It should be interpretable, right? And this makes sense. If you look at it from the perspective of a thesis and the dissertation, for instance, you want to be able to link the thesis that the student has published to the research data used, right? Or the data collected. And the data should be reusable as well, right? So those are the FAIR principles ideally. This is nice. I even had examples of the repository from Cambridge University, right? At your own time, you can look up data.cam.ac.uk to gain a sense of a typical research data repository. For the case of UNZA, I believe this is what the new UNZA. UNZA. I don't know if I'll be able to find UNZA. Yeah. UNZA is setting up this so-called it's called an integrated research information management system, right? IRIMIS, ideally. And the way this thing is supposed to work, I don't know if it's been formally launched. I know about this because I interact with people from DRD. You notice here that all the things I will be doing in here is making available data sets. I don't think we have data sets yet. I have some data sets here, but I think I can log in and I'll dump my data sets here or something like that. Right? Data sets. So imagine some of you, 3 years from now, those of you that are in year 1, doctoral studies, when you are about to graduate, you not only submit your thesis manuscript, but also the research data associated with this thesis manuscript, and it will be here. The data will be stored similar to data.com.ac.uk. I don't know if I'm able to find this. I don't know if this URL still works. Yeah, this platform here, research data management platform from the University of Cambridge. If that makes sense. I don't know. Okay. Just mention here that this is considered very important. Increasingly, as part of funding requirements, you are expected to talk about how data is going to be managed, data generated from your research. And so increasingly, most of these research institutions or research entities or higher education institutions will have data repositories like this. In addition, because this has become a common thing, there are aggregate services, right? Like the registry of research data repositories. So you can go here and you can have a sense of what sort of data repositories are available out there. .org, sorry. .org, like so, right? So it's an aggregate service. I don't know why it says it's under construction. I don't know what is happening here. Maybe I should use explicit www or something like that. Yeah, it's under construction, I don't know. But the idea is similar to OATD, right? Where they'll pull dissertations from across the world or something like that, right? To make them available in this single unified kind of platform here. So from here you can get access to OATDs, and the idea is the same with this platform here. So this is just a visual presentation showcasing where data is coming from, and I wanted to highlight the fact that there's nothing from Zambia here. But hopefully now that UNZA is a research data repository, it will be there now, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what that is. But there's more, right? On Zenodo, you'll find data. Zenodo is used increasingly as a data repository as well. Although some people also use it to archive manuscripts, ideally. Okay, so if you have a conference and you don't have anywhere to host them, you can host them on Zenodo or something. Okay. The other issue to take into account your consideration is confidentiality here, right? An important point to note here is that in most instances, data that we collect, right, we will have sensitive information that can potentially identify participants in our study. Okay, imagine you are conducting health-related research and you go to Ministry of Health, and it's like, I think we have a person who's building a model to do with adherence to ART or something. It's supposed to be in second year. I don't know how far it's gone. I thought that was a really interesting study. Now, for you to do that, right, you're getting access to sensitive information. If my details are in that registry, I want my details to be kept confidential. I don't want anybody who lays their hands on the data that you're using for research to know about my details, right? That's private information that is just supposed to be kept myself or something. So we must be cognizant of the fact that we respect the privacy of the individuals that are participating in our study, right? And so anonymity here should be assured where possible. This is one of the reasons why, under ethical consideration, in your chapter 3, or in your proposal in your section 3, in addition to stating that I am going to get ethical clearance approval from NASREC, the expectation is that you should outline exactly how you are going to guarantee anonymity to your study participants, right? If you want to be interviewing people on a sensitive topic here, like performance of the current government or something, you're conducting that study, and you come to me, well, I don't want to be identified, right? At least I'm hounded out or something, right? So you want to take into account issues to do with anonymity. And this is the reason why when you're collecting data about people, not only should you disclose should you disclose information without prior consent, but more importantly, you make sure that you only collect the minimum possible amount of data, right, to avoid identifying your participants. So when you have a questionnaire, it's rarely the case that you ask people to indicate your email address and your phone number. Don't do that unless it's absolutely necessary, right? Do not link personal identifying information to the results, ideally. Or at the very least, you make sure that you store your data safely, and when you are reporting, you anonymize. Okay, so instead of saying Lighton Piri from UNZA said this, you say lecturer 1 or lecturer 9 from UNZA said this. Don't know who is lecturer 9 here, because UNZA has more than 900 lecturers or something like that, right? And the other, this is a point tied to the last one here. The identity of individuals should not be deducible from reports, right? In your manuscript or in your what do you call this? In your journal article or something. I'll use Malaysia as an example here. You notice here that the way he was reporting and reporting in here is like this. Let's see if we can find find some example here. I don't know if I'll be able to. Participant. Just see here if I can. I wanted to demonstrate exactly how you tend to report, is it? Most of these things. I don't know if he has anything here. I don't know if Malaysia did this. Okay, this is better. So if you notice here, right? He's not really making. He's specifying details of important details as they came out of this particular study, but he's not naming these participants. They've been anonymized. You won't know who these people were, right? You won't, ideally, right? So identity of individuals should not be deducible from the reports. Yes. Okay. I don't have any thoughts here, right? In terms of these issues and considerations. So things you should take into account insofar as research ethics is concerned. A couple of important issues here, especially as they relate to how we are expected to conduct ourselves between now and when we graduate, right? When we are collecting data, by way of interviews, and when we are publishing. You know, if you have access to research funding, I know some of our students who will apply for funding, the smart ones, you apply for funding and you get funding, you don't abuse the funding. I'm working with an undergraduate student who was given Africa, was given Africa Nika or something. He was given a little bit of funding. I just want to use this as an example or something like, I don't know. There's some mentorship program that Africa has and stuff like that. So I don't know. Probably will find these details. He's getting some really reasonable money or something. There we go. Kangwa, right? But so the money he's using has got to be, so it applies to him. This money we're talking about is not just for, or just because the lecturer, because he's able to apply for funding. Even you can apply for funding. And incidentally, I've spoken to some of the students I'm working with and encouraged them to say, you know, if you're funding yourself, you don't have to fund your way through a PhD, right? It's funding that is typically made available. Sadly, Google, this Google PhD funding thing here, fellowship is way past here, but maybe next year some of you will apply. It's easy to get in here, right? They especially look for people from Africa or something. I know the obsession is usually like, you know, SAD is done now. It's usually on, you know, places like those coming from Africa or something like that. But anyways, hopefully this gives us an idea of the things to take into account. But the question is then, what exactly leads to this, right? What are some of the factors that actually lead people to engage in unethical research behavior? So I want us to talk about a few things. Some of these things are probably tied to you or something. Some of them may be specific to maybe your supervisors, right? So I want us to talk about these things here before we wrap up. First up here is peer competition, I guess. And I was comparing myself with somebody I was with in first year. Dr. Nyimbini is in engineering, right? And I want to draw attention here to citations, right? I want to be like Benjani here and get close to 300 citations, but I only have 108 citations. How do I do that? I start gaming the system, right? Self-plagiarism or self-citation. Or I talk to my colleagues and we form a quote-unquote citation cartel. There are such cartels, right? I'll cite your work, cite mine, right? That's unethical behavior, is it? So what we're saying here is that things like peer competition may actually influence people to engage in unethical behavior. What else? Pressure to publish. You're a PhD student or a master's by research student, you know that you're not going anywhere. They're not going to give you that degree until you publish journal articles. You are sitting there and it's August, and you know that at your workplace, if you teach for a living, you only be able to progress only when you get your PhD. This can lead you down the path where you start engaging in unethical behavior, is it? Like asking people you know to add you to the list of authors. That paper that you told me about, please, can you add me as an author or something? That's unethical behavior, is it? Yeah. Or you have like one publication, but for you to graduate as a doctoral student, you need a minimum of 2. You get what you publish, you just change it a little, maybe just change the title, and then you submit it elsewhere. And you claim, right, that you have 2 publications. That's unethical behavior. So pressure to publish. And it turns out that pressure to publish not only affects you, but it also affects me, right? For me to be promoted to the next level, well, the way I'm assessed by my employers, the University of Zambia here, is they look at my performance relative to community engagement, consultancy, research, and teaching, right? So the UNZA has this promotion tool, and I think I was showing you this tool here. It's called the Academic Promotion Scoring System. So every time you're applying for promotion, you go in here, you have to make sure that you adhere to these things, right? Otherwise, you won't be promoted like that. You know, so you may have this pressure, right, to be promoted all your colleagues at the level of, I guess, associate professor or something, and there's is it 3 more years before you retire, and you're nowhere near reaching the associate professor level. That can potentially lead you down the path where you start engaging in unethical behavior. We're not saying here, we're stating things that can influence people to engage in unethical behavior, right? So career progression, right? Or promotion. What else? Financial incentives, is it? Funding is usually conditional on the fact that you have published things in a particular area that these funders are interested in. This example I have is to do with Wikipedia. Every year they give out funding, usually some decent money too, right? One of the conditions is usually that if you notice here, I don't know if there's a research condition, you probably know. Somewhere in here, embedded in here, you should have done research on and about Wikipedia or something like that. So this may force you to do very unorthodox things as well, right? If that makes sense here. What else? Well, lack of enforcement, right? So if there are no rules, I don't know about these other universities in the Republic, because we have a lot of universities, right? Each year. We have a lot of universities in Zambia, right? This is me saying that I have no idea whether these universities that we have, there's 130 items here apparently. I don't know if all of these universities have processes and procedures in place to enforce issues associated with unethical behavior. We certainly know that the UNZA is very serious about this. And if I were you, I would avoid anything to do with plagiarism and all those things, right? Otherwise, you'll be found wanting here. But what I have here is from the Staff Disciplinary and Grievance Code of Conduct, the one I showed you. Okay, so I'm showcasing, I guess, the penalties associated with offenses tied to unethical behavior. So, but the key thing here is that a potential factor that can influence somebody to engage in unethical conduct here is lack of enforcement. So if people realize that there are no rules in place, right? If I do something wrong, nothing will happen to me. They probably won't care, is it? They'll just, engage in plagiarism, sadly, I guess, I don't know. They will misappropriate funds. They will submit work in multiple publication venues and all those things. So lack of enforcement here. Okay. There could be a couple of other things here, right? Personal gain, I guess, I don't know. Maybe lack of training, I suppose. I always use this as a way of prompting a conversation centered around this to say maybe, just maybe, some people engage in unethical behavior like publishing or submitting multiple publications or publishing multiple publication venues or publishing in proprietary journals because they are ignorant, because they never enrolled in a research methodology or research methods course. I don't know about that, right? I mean, for you to get to a stage where you're doing this in a real world setting here, you should have at least enrolled in a research ethics course or something, a research methodology course or something like that. I don't know. I don't have any thoughts about this here, about the factors that influence sort of behavior. Maybe people are, well, let's get this over with so that we move on to the next stage. That's fine. What follows next are things that I've already talked about. The idea of putting this there is to let you know that in its quest of taking research ethics seriously, the University of Zambia has structures in place, research ethics committees. There are 3 of them. You'll find these details on the DRD website, so graduate.unza.zm. On there, you shall find details of, or rather templates of forms that you'd have to fill in. This is an example of a form, an application form for ethical approval associated with the Humanities and Social Sciences Research Ethics Committee. This is a screen grab of a form that one of my students, he's since graduated, Adrian Chisale, had submitted. I think I should have included Fraser Nyambe's ethical clearance approval form. I'll probably upload that as an example, I guess. I will share that. I'll ask Fraser if I can share that, the form that you filled in, and the approval itself, so that you can use it as a guide as you're planning to apply, because Fraser applied to the NASREC ideally. Okay, so it's just a continuation of the form itself. It's not a very difficult form to fill out, self-explanatory really. The only key thing is the auxiliary information that you have got to provide, right? The protocol, informed consent forms, information sheets, the full proposal, the summary proposal. But these are things that you obviously already have on hand as you're applying or something like that. This is an example of an information sheet. I think I downloaded it and I showcased it to you. This is specific to the Humanities and Social Sciences Research Ethics Committee. You notice the header here. But the idea is the same. The contents that you find in here are ideally the same. Again, just a sample of the consent form. The long and short of it really is that when it comes to the UNZA, at a bare minimum, before you conduct any sort of research, whether you're a student or a member of staff, and especially a student actually, you are supposed to get ethical clearance approval from either the Humanities and Social Sciences Research Ethics Committee, the Natural and Applied Sciences Research Ethics Committee, or the University of Zambia Biomedical Research Ethics Committee. So HSS, REC, NASREC, and UNZA-BREC respectively. For you to do this, one of the things you're expected to do is to fill out forms, right, like this. This form must have supporting documentation, which amongst other things will include the information sheets, right, the consent forms associated with all your studies. Okay, so I mean, the long and short of it is that when it comes to research ethics, I think this should be sufficient information to help you get started. If you are a doctoral student at the beginning where you are refining your concept, if I were you, right now, don't do these things in parallel. Download the form, start filling it in. Once you're done with your proposal and you present and you're given a go-ahead, you just submit the forms. At the same time, look at your research and then try and think about which other entities you're going to apply ethical clearance approval from, right? Like in health, NHRA. In education, and the Ministry of Health. In education, Ministry of Education, and all those things. So these other areas I don't know, right? Like for banks, I don't know. If you're extracting, I know we have people doing all sorts of crazy things here, crazy but interesting things, which is quite good. People that are working at the intersection of computing and veterinary medicine or animal science. I don't know whether you have to get, permission or ethical clearance approval from those entities. Don't know. I know one of our students is looking at anthrax or something. Is it anthrax? I don't know if it's anthrax or I don't know. So yeah, at the very beginning, at the very least, you want to do this. If you're a master's student who is doing this for credit, already you can create a shared folder, a Google Drive, folder somewhere, download these forms, come up with a plan, and remind yourself to include ethical clearance approval in your plan. Is it because one of the key deliverables we're expecting from 5019 is a research proposal. So I don't know if you've already gotten to a stage where you're thinking about the type of topic you're going to focus on. So I'm going to pause here and ask if there are questions. I had already braced myself for us to start looking at this next lecture series, but we're going to start this next week. And what we're doing next week is we're going to double back and to the research methods. We're starting with how we frame problem statements, objectives, and all those things. So we're doubling back here. But I don't know if you have any thoughts or questions about this. And I know there's like 30 minutes left here, but I wouldn't want us to start. Yes.
Yes, good evening, Prof.
Yes.
Oh, dog.
No.
Dog.
I'm far from that.
Okay.
Very far. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So I've got two questions. My first one is just clarification on publishing in multiple I don't know areas. Yeah, the same research in multiple areas. I don't know, maybe if you could just shed more light. Maybe it's the way I was looking at research publications. Maybe I was comparing them to, let's say, books. The way people can basically publish their books almost everywhere. So that kind of caught me a bit off guard. And then the second one is so it's something I did to confess. I did it in a certain kind of assignment. So one thing I realized is after you do, let's say, kind of an assignment, right?
Yeah.
And then after you do the typing, you type everything, and then you realize there's some incorrect spelling, some grammar, you don't really know how to construct this sentence and everything. So just put everything in AI just to help with the grammar, the spellings, and all that kind of thing. And then one day I just decided, I was curious. I decided to put it in AI to see, after coming across the whole plagiarism and everything, I was like, let me put it in AI to see what score I would get. Just curious what ChatGPT would say about my assignment. And then coincidentally, just after asking it to help me with some spellings and a bit of grammar here and there, you find I would get a score of 80%. And which was surprising. I was like, what do you mean? I just asked for a bit of grammar and a couple of sentences here and there, and it bring 80%. I don't know if that was, maybe it's the tool I used. But in such a situation, what would you advise? And maybe you've already submitted, and then there's this situation, so it's quite concerning. And then you realize, oh, I'm done for when you look at all the rules and regulations. I think that's it for me.
Yeah, great questions, but I mean, I'll start with the last one here. And the reason why I was taking note of this to say tool use and how to use the tool here is it all depends on the extent towards which you're using the tool, right? And unfortunately, for some courses and some assignments, some course instructors will be so strict that they'll be using tools to try and check if you are using AI tools to generate content, right? I tend to be more progressive like that. For me, it's all about the idea, right? In fact, when I was a student, my introduction to grad school was quite interesting. My supervisor was supervising people from all across the world. One of his students was from the Sudan, not South Sudan, but Arabic-speaking Sudan, right? Not Sudan, I guess, but the main Sudan. And this person had a horrible command of the English language, right? They had difficulty expressing themselves, even writing. And so what he was encouraged to do was to find somebody to write on their behalf. But in addition to this, right, what typically happens at the UNZA, if you got your master's at the UNZA, what most of you have been told at the very end, right, as one of the comments from your examiners would be, the quality of writing is not good enough. The candidate is advised to hire the services of a copy editor, right? So what they're telling you is, before this thing is finally submitted, go and find an expert who's going to help you fix the grammar and the typos, typographical errors, ideally. One would argue, and this is me, right, saying, I would argue that your modern day copy editor has turned into this generative AI mode or tool or something, or chatbot, right? So I guess it goes with the extent towards which you're using this generative AI. If you're using it in such a way that you're telling it, generate this assignment for me, of course, I mean, it's going to generate this thing in such a way that another tool is going to actually be able to detect the fact that this was written by an AI. Right, and there are telltale signs. You can. It's not that difficult to tell apart something that has been generated with AI versus something that has not been generated with AI. So my answer to that would be, it's probably how you're using the tool. If I were you, I'd be avoiding giving the tool the entire document and just say, rewrite this, right? But rather just ask it, can you flag out, can you help me flag problematic issues in this document? You get that, and then you focus on the problematic issue, you rewrite them yourself or something. I have no idea why it would have been 80 here. I don't know what was happening here, but it's increasingly becoming hard actually for these Gen AI detection tools to actually figure out if something has been written by AI. And in fact, especially if you look at our undergraduate students, and I guess some of our postgraduate students, they become really smart at this, right? You have your assignment, you generate it using AI, you get that output, you pass it to another AI, spot issues that, identify this as being generated by AI and write it. You can even use RAG, say, write using this as an example. So I think things are changing, and I think people are becoming more receptive to this idea that it's okay to use these tools like this, right? And then for the, I don't know if I've answered the question there, but for the first part here, for the multiple publication venues, you see, you're conflating two things here, right? When you're saying you've seen books published in different locations or something, what you're talking about is somewhat similar to even journal articles, right? If you were to look up some of the things that I've published, look at Google Scholar, for instance, right? If we search for light and period here, and you look at some of the things I've published, the way Google Scholar works is, if you look at this publication, this was published in the International Journal of Metadata, Semantics, and I don't know what else is there, right? But guess what? You have 9 versions that have been indexed by Google Scholar. So meaning that this one publication is found on 9 different places, ideally. It's on DSpace, at UNZA, it's on the original publisher website, it's been indexed at this place called eLibrary. I have no idea what this is. It's some Russian website. It's on my research group website. So I think this is what you're conflicting here. What we are saying is that when you write something, scholarly output, you typically publish it somewhere. In my case, for this particular article here, journal article, the official publication venue is this journal here. There could be other places where this thing will be indexed and archived, but there's one place where it was originally published. And usually, when you are publishing, I don't know if it's Professor Peter will talk about this, but maybe we can talk about it during literature review. When you publish work, right, you give away copyright. I don't know if you are paying attention when I looked at this, right? This licensing agreement. When you sign here, you are giving away copyright access to this document to the people that are going to publish, right? For this particular one here, incidentally, it's been published now. We gave away our rights, but they're telling us that what we are allowed to do are these things, right? Grant of rights here. These are the things we're allowed to do and stuff like that. So what I meant here is when you write an article, the first thing you do, if you're a doctoral student, maybe in your second year, third year or something, and you started writing, the first thing your supervisors will do is they'll tell you to say, go and find a publication venue as a way of helping you learn the art of academia, right? Find an appropriate place where we're going to publish this work. Is it a conference or a journal, right? A nice way of doing this is you can use Google Scholar, right? Google Scholar has, if you go to Matrix, exercise this vertical menu here, you go to Matrix. You go to Matrix, you go under publications here, you view all, and then under categories here, you can filter, right? So if you're in computing here, you say, I want to look at publication venues for engineering and computer science. What about computer science? Well, I'm focusing on artificial intelligence, maybe educational technologies, maybe self-informatics, but we'll go with maybe it's human-computer interaction if you're in IS or IT or something. You're doing information technology or information thing here. So let's say it's artificial intelligence, right? To come here, you notice here that if I'm doing research to do with AI, these are some of, no, this is not conclusive here. These are some of the potential publication venues where I can publish the research that I would have done. I write this article, I can choose, do I submit it to neuroinformation processing systems? Do I submit it to expert systems applications? Do I submit it to artificial intelligence review? When I choose where to submit it to, I submit it there. I can't come here and say, well, I'll submit it to Africa Intelligence Review. I'll also submit it here. I'll submit it here. That is unethical conduct. I saw unethical because if you submit it to multiple publication venues, you have multiple sets of reviewers looking at the same things, right? You're wasting people's time. But more importantly, you are doing the wrong things. It's like cheating. A nice thing about this is when you write an article, you're contributing to the body of knowledge. Now, I'll tell you this, right? If I say I publish this to Zambia ICT Journal, and then I decide to publish again Medical Journal of Zambia because we are doing health-related research here. Well, it's going to be considered new knowledge if it appears in Zambia ICT Journal, right? But it won't be new knowledge if I again publish it in Medical Journal of Zambia. It's the same thing, right? So it's unethical. It's actually considered cheating because we know that most people do this to cheat, to game the system, is it? Why? Well, I want to be promoted to associate professor or whatever promotion you are chasing after. Or for places like South Africa where you are given money. I didn't mention this. There are monetary incentives, right? And Rosa is working towards that. If you publish in a top-tier journal in South Africa, they give you money, right? So because money is the root of evil, apparently, some people want to get more money, right? So you publish multiple things here. So there's a difference here between where the thing is going to be indexed, which is usually going to be multiple things, right? If you look at some of these, I don't know about the things that we just, this is just one publication, the most recent publications there. But if you look at most of these, I'll give you an example of this thing here, right? It's been published in 54 different, there are 54 different versions here. It's on the British Medical Journal here. It's on I don't know what how it is here. It's on so many different, it's been indexed on multiple platforms, but it was only published in the British Medical Journal. You understand this? If that makes sense. Okay. I don't know if there are any other thoughts about this. I'm hoping that this discussion about ethics in research is or has been helpful. Some of the things that we may have left out, I imagine you figure them out with your supervisor. They'll probably tell you that. I think there's a hand up from Chimuka.
Thank you, Doc. I think, as you had earlier highlighted, one of the issues with publishing is that it takes a while. So my question is, how would the UNZA, or how it be seen? Let's say objective 1, I publish with A, and the fact that I've had a good experience with A, I proceed again later on to publish objective 2 with site A. Would there be an issue with me repeating the same publishing site? Thank you.
No. Actually, it shows consistency. So if you're a researcher, right? You can't have your I mean, you can't find yourself everywhere, right? I mean, there are researchers like that where you do research in, I don't know, in all sorts of areas, right? Cybersecurity, AI, educational technologies. It's like typically the expectation when you're researchers, you specialize. And when you specialize, you become a part of this close-knit community. These close-knit communities will publish work in confined areas, specific areas. So usually, in fact, it's a sign when you're publishing in the same venue. It could potentially be a sign that you're consistent. I'll give you an example of me. In any given year, I have students that publish in ICICT. Last year, we co-published with Fraser Nyambe in ICICT. I co-published with Chivesa, right? Mwanga Chivesa, ICICT. Harris Chikapande, ICICT. The other year with Elijah, ICICT. With Andrew Shaw, ICICT. So it's okay. You wouldn't really be you can actually publish all the objectives in the same publication venue. The rules, right? The constraints are in the guidelines. In the guidelines, you notice that they'll tell you that where you are publishing, it must not be a predatory journal, right? What else? The impact factor must be at least 1. What else? The journals must be indexed in a major biometric or academic database, I want to call it. PubMed Central, Web of Science, Scopus, which is why some of your supervisors will tell you, no, we can't publish here because it's not a Scopus index journal or something. It's because of these requirements here. Okay? Typically, the simplest requirements to meet here is Agile, for instance. There are a number of low-tier journals that you'll find in Agile and DOAJ, Director of Open Access Journals or something. So it doesn't matter whether you publish these 2 articles in the same journal. They won't, you won't be penalized for that. Okay.
Thank you, Dr.
Sir.
Yes.
Sorry, just on question 2, back on question 2. So,
yep.
As I went further into also thinking that, it might even be a good research topic, because one might argue that the more we train our AI models to be like us, we can see that AI tools and AI in general is beginning to adapt to our personalities, because you can also chat with AI in different voices, different personalities. You're able to do that. So one might argue that even though you're writing, if you try to write in a professional manner and the AI has been trained to write in that professional manner, wouldn't it be the same? Because it's already trained. So it's not identifying or detecting that it's basically itself, because it's been trained on the same writing. So one might argue that it's getting difficult to use AI tools to identify whether a certain content was written with AI, because AI is trained with. So I don't know if or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, so my thoughts, my immediate answer to that is we don't know, right? We don't know. And you raise an important point, by the way. And I want us to get used to this, because this is why we're doing 1519, right? We don't know. We're just speculating. We don't know. You raise an important point to say maybe this would be an interesting research problem. We don't know, because we don't know how the algorithms that are designed to detect these things, how they work, what they check for. Sorry, Nyemi, you are doing AI, right? You're an AI major. You're doing the,
yes, sir.
Yeah, so I mean, you seem to sound like you're gravitating. This could be an interesting. This could be an interesting topic. Maybe you should start preparing to write a proposal centered around this. I think it would be interesting. I don't know, but we don't know. The argument, I mean, it sounds plausible, right?
Yes.
By just looking at things at the very surface here. But we don't know. We'll probably have to conduct a study. And maybe people have actually conducted studies. Would have to do a meta-analysis to see what sort of results people have gotten. It's possible, though. Yeah.
Because when you look at chats, they're able to adapt to the way you interact with the model, and then it responds to you as a person. And then if you go to someone else's phone, it's able to respond to them. But then all of a sudden, if you use AI to check if his AI, if his content is AI, to say it's AI, but that's the person, and the AI has just adapted to. So, but thank you for the answer.
Yeah, so I think it would be an interesting thing to do. I mean, you can easily extend this to include other relevant aspects, because another important point you raised is that these things are here. Everybody's using these tools, right? I use these tools extensively, but I would like to think I also use them ethically as well. So it will be potentially be an interesting kind of thing to look at. Maybe look at the extent towards which people are using this in an environment like the user environment, and hopefully, maybe you as a key output, you can probably come up with a novel way of developing a more effective tool to actually check if something has been purely generated using AI. I don't know, right? Good stuff.
I was
By the way,
thinking giving a mini.
I advise us to maybe start thinking about potential topics, especially if you are in year one, right? You're doing this for credit. Because remember, one of the outcomes of this is going to be a proposal. So as we are getting to the next lecture series, which is this, for this to make sense, I would like to advise you to already start thinking about a topic of interest. If you have a problem, well and good, but for now, maybe just a topic, right? And then when we get to, perhaps not here, but when we get to literature review, we'll talk about how exactly we can carve out ideas. Or using a topic, we can search for gaps and all those things. This will make more sense if we work together, right? Using a problem you have identified. For the doctoral students, it shouldn't be a problem because you already have concept notes. So there's a starting point. Those may change, but you already have a starting point. So maybe between now and Thursday next week, my advice would be, let's all identify topics so that when we start looking at, how to craft a well-framed problem statement, as we're looking at examples, as we're discussing the core concepts tied to that, you are actually making modifications to your work or your planned work. All right. With that being said, this is 2024. If there are no more questions, I'll see you on Thursday next week. I will share these things on. I think there's still a couple of hands up. We'll start with Miss Malo, I think, and then we'll go to Monga.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I wanted to find out when it comes to finding a research topic, are there specific themes or categories? Maybe I missed that part.
Okay. You're doing AI as well, right? You moved from computer science.
Yes.
Yeah. So here's the thing. The starting point first is, if you're doing AI, right, the expectation is that the topic has got to be aligned with AI. So for instance, nobody's going, the department will not allow you to submit a proposal where you're saying, we are interested in understanding how the Zambia government portal, right? The usability of this portal or something. I think it should be wonderful. I use this extensively. I know there are flaws here. So if there's somebody doing IS, maybe a little bit of IT, especially IS, there you go, right? And in fact, if you're doing IS, I want to tell you something here. You want to start off, if you're looking for a topic, look up Zambia's digital transformation strategy, right? You will find amazing things here that can help you identify a topic, right? So back to your question, Ms. Melo. You can't suggest a topic that is centered around, because when you're trying to understand whether this thing is usable, that's like HCI, right? I mean, you can probably make an argument to say maybe it can be carved out as a computer science project or something, because human-computer interaction is a subfield of computer science, but certainly not AI, right? So a starting point here has got to be, you're focusing on a problem that is tied to AI. Now, the interesting thing about problems is that they're actually discipline agnostic, okay? And I think your question of how you find a research topic here is maybe more probably should be framed, where do I find problems? And I think we're going to talk about that in literature review, really, but you can find problems in existing literature, right? So when you are reading, there's no substitute for reading, right? When you're looking for a problem, first starting point, you must read broadly first, right? Far and wide, broadly. After you read, you start narrowing down. You start appreciating what people in your field consider to be important topics or areas or something. So it's state of the art, if you will. Okay? Typically in existing literature, towards the end, in the conclusion, people include things like future work or something like that, right? So that's reading. The other way is, but problems are everywhere, actually. If you work, the easiest place to find a problem is at work, right? Is there something, a pressing problem at your workplace that can be addressed using an AI-centric solution or using AI, because your major is AI here, right? So there's that. And then also, I don't know if you do this a lot, but I listen to the radio a lot, right? When you just sit down, if there's an interview or something, there are problems all over, right? If you look at what's currently happening here, I think as we're talking about computing here, if you just spend time on these Facebook pages, there are problems there, right? That can be carved out as computer science problems, as AI problems. If you look at the important direction that ministries and the government are following here, there are problems there, right? Vision 2030. If you just spend time and you Zambia Vision 2030, and you just read this short document, you will find problems in here. If you go to strategies, right? Seeing as you're doing AI, Zambia AI strategy, you will find that what government is outlining as the direction they want to follow can actually help you narrow down on a problem. So really, maybe I guess it's I guess we are doing this for the system, and really we're looking at the problem from the perspective of research, right? Because we have to set apart these general engineering problems from research, but this has got to be a research problem. Maybe that's where the issue is. This will make sense. I want to say maybe let's give it time until we cover literature review. Maybe after that, you will discover how to cover out problems. But from my experience, the best starting point is read. Start reading. And how do you start reading? Ask yourself, right? When it comes to AI, start with the branches of AI. What do I find exciting? Right? Is it, do I get excited when it comes to algorithms or something? Right? Do I see what I'm doing here to be centered around contribution to theory or something like that? Right? Implementing like some novel algorithm or something. Do I get excited with a specific branch of AI, right? NLP? Or is it vision, right? Is it computer vision? When you narrow down on specifics, then you can use tools like, and we'll discuss this, I guess, when we start looking at this. You start using tools like Google Scholar, right? You're narrowing down. When it comes to AI, if you look at this publication venue, some of them focus on vision, on computer vision. Some of them is NLP, some of them are general, right? So you start narrowing down. And it turns out that the more you read, when you read far and wide, you begin to appreciate how people carve out problems, how problems are identified. So I would say reading here, I suppose. Maybe we should start also doing a little bit of reading assignments or something. Yeah, so that's a nice way of identifying problems. As you are, see, these courses that you're enrolled into, right? The reason why those of you that are doing coursework and dissertation, the idea behind the coursework and dissertation is to evoke some sense of curiosity. So you notice that you have different people teaching you these different courses, and the hope is that in the process, you will gravitate more towards a specific area in the program that you pursue. So for the people that are doing IT, maybe it will be data mining, maybe it will be human-computer interaction, right? Maybe it will be just general application, right? Maybe it will be development, is it? Using that, you can then narrow down on specific. But you know, problems are, but maybe because I've been doing this for a long time. I was literally sitting down with my fourth-year students here today, and we're sitting down, and I noticed they were going around in circles in terms of the problems, right? So I was helping them frame out or identify problems. So there are these problems here. They're all over, though, and interesting problems when it comes to AI also. Okay. I hope this answers your question to some certain extent, but I want to say that let's give it time. Let's at least, if you can remind us, raise this question again once we are done with our discussion of literature review, which comes right after this lecture series. When we're done with lecture series number 3, number 4 is going to focus on literature review. And then at that point, if you still be a bit lost here, then we can revisit this again. All right. Is that another hand up? I think Nyeme has a hand up. Or it was an odd hand or something. Maybe odd hand or something. All right. I guess it's an odd hand. Colleagues, this is 2083. I hope I wasn't talking to myself here. This is 2023. I think we can leave it at that. Is that a hand up, Nyeme, or it's an odd hand, maybe? I will see you when you see me, just in case there was something typed in the chat. Nothing. Okay. Thanks a lot, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your week. Please avoid. There's a lot of noise I've noticed. I wonder if somebody can carve out a problem about noise, right? You know, I remember one time we did a reading list about a paper to do with prediction election results using Twitter data or something, and I think one of our students is now a doctoral student carved out. I thought it was interesting. They did a problem that was somewhat aligned to that. I think it was. Is that a hand up from John? I think.
Yes, Doc.
Yes.
Are you able to get me?
I can get you, but your voice is a bit muffled. I don't know if you can move closer to the microphone, or if you're using headsets, maybe use your integrated microphone or something.
Oh, okay. My mic is not functioning. I wanted to find out about the other courses you have not been learning.
Yes, I think I saw that message actually. You sent me. I've responded. I'm going to follow up you mentioned 2 courses for data science, right? Yeah. So expect to hear from me tomorrow. I've actually already reached out to the lecturers just to get a response on that.
Okay.
Doc,
Yeah.
on that same vein,
Yes.
the other students who didn't take ethics last semester, then would they have to take it again now? If so, then that would be 3 courses.
Do you want to drop me an email about the students that didn't take ethics? I think you're also doing data science together with John, right?
Yes, and I did
Yeah.
take ethics. I was just curious to see what happens to the other students who didn't.
Yes. So if you can, I'll have to check details of ethics and with the course convener and all that. If you can, through John, if John can help us compile the list of students that are affected, then I'll make a follow-up as well.
Noted.
All right. Thanks. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody, and good night.
Doc,
See you next week.
Doc.
Yes.
So concerning the courses, I just had one question. So if let's say somebody didn't include the advanced statistics and opted for ethics, since there are like 2 electives, what happens to the advanced statistics?
So I mean, I'll have to check here for data science. What I did though, I put up a spreadsheet for people to specify the courses that they're enrolled into, right? So what you have to make sure is you're enrolled in all the core courses, and then in addition to the core courses, you choose the number of electives to ensure that your courses total up to 8 courses. So 4 in semester number 1 and 4 in semester number 2. So if you have issues with your course combination and the instructions that were sent through are not very clear, do you want to drop me an email and send me details of, because my understanding is advanced statistics is a term 2 course. So I'm not really sure if drop me an email and then I'll check your course combination and I'll be able to advise you accordingly.
Okay, okay, Doc. I think what you sent, the one that was taken out to a spreadsheet, I had included it, but my concern was just like on my portal, I didn't opt for advanced statistics, but I managed to include it on the spreadsheet you sent, that link.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll check the spreadsheet. Maybe there've been updates that I did not take into account, and then we'll update the portal.
All right, Doc.
All right. There's another question from, I think, Kennedy.
Yes, Doc. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, the AI class, we've not really met any of our other lecturers in the other courses. Also, considering that because of the circumstance we had, where we are having 5 courses, but I think no one has really showed up except you in this course.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm also taking you in NLP. I will follow up the others. I was under the impression that you had started meeting with Dr. Nyirenda or something. I'll make a follow up. Is there a course rep? Can I ask the course rep to maybe drop me a WhatsApp message about this, just as a reminder, and then I'll follow up, just like the data science group as well.
Okay.
Right. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. 2039. This was good. We'll see you next Thursday. Bye for now.